Many months ago, I began my journey of replaying through all of the Dark Souls trilogy after losing all my save data. Or in Dark Souls 2's case, just never owning it on PC. Dark Souls 3 sets out to tell the end of the story and the end of the world. Does it succeed? Yes, I absolutely love this game. Sorry, there's no mystery here. Regardless, I hope you're more than willing to join me on this one final journey to completely ignore the main goal given to us and find the alternate ending because it's funny. Let's get started with Dark Souls 3. Before we really get going, I just wanted to let you know that Jackass is making his grand return from Dark Souls 2 because he wasn't satisfied making all of Drangleic fall before him. We've got monsters to slay and people to save. Or let die because I missed a step in their oddly specific questline. Yeah, that's Dark Souls 3 for you. And spoilers, I only successfully completed like 3 of the questlines this playthrough, but they're my 3 favorite questlines, so hey, I have no complaints with that. The Cemetery of Ash is our introductory area where we can get acquainted with the controls and assaulted by the locals. The most notable thing you'll find in this opening bit is the Ash and Estus flask, which is pretty much impossible to miss because it's right in front of you, but also it's important to note because Dark Souls 3 has a magic meter instead of a set number of spell uses, so unfortunately I don't really like running magic builds in this game. Jackass might be a scholar, but for this run we'll primarily unga-bunga our way through it with only a little bit of help from the Almighty. There is an optional path we can take here that has a giant crystal lizard you can face off against that's much angrier than the variants from Dark Souls 1 and 2, and ready for revenge for all the kin you murdered back in those games. And yeah, I got my first death already. There will be a lot of deaths in this run. This is by no means a no-death run, though I actually die a lot more in the early game than I do in the late game of Dark Souls 3. It's probably just because I remember the late game more. After doing a little bit of going further and not dying to the crystal lizard, you'll find your first proper bonfire of the game, and now, if we do a very slight bit of exploring, you can find a Titanite shard and more importantly a couple of fire bombs you can pick up early. These might prove useful to new players, and if not, they can always be traded in for some stuff a bit later on, and that will be helpful. Kind of. Now, when you're ready for your introductory butt kicking, pull the sealing sword out of the suspiciously pulsing armor and get ready for the first boss of the game against Trial Battle, also known as Udex Gundyr. Gundyr is a humanoid opponent like many foes faced off in Dark Souls 2, but with a level of speed and aggression you'd normally only see on a late game foe, not the very first boss. However, he has overall low health and damage output on his end, as well as having very telegraphed attacks and a weakness to parrying, informing players that parries are going to be on the table throughout this game, even for boss fights. Which is probably good design since Dark Souls 2 started trying to implement them throughout the game for boss fights. And, you know, Dark Souls 1 had Gwyn, and then there was also Bloodborne, which followed through with having a lot of humanoid bosses be parried, and the reason why Orphan of Kos is actually not as hard as a lot of people seem to think he is. And overall, I think he does a good job. Though, another thing to keep in mind is while he may be faster and aggressiver than a lot of bosses you've seen up to this point in the series, you're also much faster and can be far more aggressive than you could on the previous games. But the real shake-up is when he gets to half health and the game pulls out its surprise as Udex Gundyr transforms into a terrifying abyssal creature known as the Pus of Man. It's got massive range and size, as well as some real power behind those attacks, making it kind of an oppressive force to fight. And it can also be kind of a pain in the ass if you're not ready for it. However, if you explore thoroughly, you've got some fire bombs which can potentially turn this dangerous foe into a trivial speed bump. Overall, I think Udex Gundyr does a good job as a first boss, and it sets one heck of a first impression. Not bad, if I say so myself. Now, with Udex dead, we need to go a little bit further to reach our designated safe haven of the game and our hub world, Firelink Shrine. This is probably an unpopular take, but I honestly really like this hub world. Dark Souls 3 is an especially unwelcoming world to explore, so coming back here so often just makes this place in particular feel much cozier and like you develop a bond with all the residents here. Something I don't think the other Souls games did too well aside from Majula and Dark Souls 2. That place I honestly wouldn't mind living at in general, while here I'd kind of only really want to be here in an apocalyptic situation if I had to. Anyways, y'all know the drill, so I'm going to explain the NPCs and their functions. We have our obligatory Firekeeper lady, who's your nice and friendly face, always happy to see you and help you, and also level you up. She'll also do little dances when you emote, which is actually a very nice little touch. Overall, I do like her character, and I think she's a step up over Bear Seek Lest's Shanalot. Next up, we have the Handmaid, who acts as your merchant lady, and I don't really like her character that much, but she is useful, so we're gonna make use of her. Also, don't kill her. It's not that she'll die permanently, she'll respawn, but every time she gets killed, either by your actions or by a terrible glitch, she's going to raise the prices by 20%. You will suffer if you make her die. And returning from Dark Souls 1 is Andre as our blacksmith. How is he alive? Well, for one, the dude is jacked, so he probably wasn't in any danger of being killed. And for two, well, fan service, but I guess if I was to give a plot reason, I'm pretty sure it's that he just never lost his purpose, so he never hollowed because he still had purpose in his life. Anyways, he's here to upgrade your equipment, and he'll also upgrade your Estus flasks. Really useful. I like him a lot. We have Hawkwood, the obligatory crestfallen useless dude. He's mildly useful, but he's also a jackass, and not in the affectionate name sort of way, so I don't really like him very much, but I'm not killing him yet because, well, there's no reason to. Then there's Lukelith, a man that is currently useless, but will be very helpful to us a bit later, so be nice to him. Otherwise, with our facilities known, we have our story objective. We must kill the 5 evil general guys to take on the Dark Emperor dude at the end of it all with a sad backstory or something like that. I don't know, I've been actually kind of in a Fire Emblem mood recently. Anyways, before doing all that, it's time to ignore everything and go do a little side activity. You see, outside, off to the side of Firelink Shrine, there is a somewhat tough NPC known as the Swordmaster. It can be a bit challenging to bring him down due to his strong weapon and the bleed buildup of the Uji Katana, but I recommend taking him out now for a nice amount of early game souls, being able to get the ever useful Uchi Katana, and there will also be another perk that'll be helpful to new players, which I will discuss a bit later when it's relevant. Either way, with him dead, you'll be more than ready to head into the kingdom proper and save the world. Or something. Welcome to Highwall Lothric, where the game is going to begin for real this time. Ready to pick up a bunch of items? Good, because there's enemies here as well, and they are a step up from the ones in the cemetery since they actually want to kill you, and can do a pretty good job at it. And we've had some dangerous foes, like some great axe wielding hollows, as well as some that can mutate into pus of men like Udex did. The game also has some pretty nice visuals going on and a good sense of scale because you can see the upper parts of Lothric Castle here, and you can also just see how big this entire wall is. Ultimately, while we won't be exploring the entirety of the wall, we will be going up to where the castle is, as that's where the game ultimately ends. And I have to admit, I'm a sucker for whenever you play a video game and a location you can see early on in the game ends up being a location you get to go to much later in the game. I like when games do that. It adds a good sense of world building and it helps things feel much grander. That being said, when you get to this point, be careful because a wyvern's going to come flying down and he's going to burn everything away. It's a very annoying level hazard if you don't stay on top of it because the fire stuns you when it burns. And just past the wyvern, we see our very first treasure chest of the game, but if you look closely, you might notice the chain is looking kinda off compared to the Dark Souls 1 variants. Yeah, the very first treasure chest in Dark Souls 3 is a mimic. This is a common joke about Dark Souls 3, is that there's more mimics in this game than there are actual treasure chests, so keep a close eye on the chains before picking them up, or, you know, things are going to be dangerous. You can also just attack the chest that you see, because this isn't Dark Souls 2, where they can be destroyed, so the items will never break. Alternatively, there is the Duelist Charms, items that are usually useless as all they do is disable a player's Estus Flask. Well, here, they have the added benefit of causing the Mimic to open itself up, so you can take its contents without having to fight them. That can be useful later on in the game and in longer levels. However, this early in the game, it's better to choose violence. And this Mimic is not that hard to dodge, just watch his moves, he's very clearly telegraphed. Once you take him out though, you will get a special weapon known as the Deep Battle Axe, a very powerful early game weapon that deals both physical and dark damage, which means it will slaughter the boss of this level. However, it has a trade-off of having no scaling. However, this early on in the game, raw stats will get you a lot further than scaling will, so you don't need to worry about it, and you don't need to waste too many Titanite shards on this thing. No more than 2. Think of it kind of like Fire Emblem with the whole base stats versus growths when determining how good a character is. It's kind of the same thing here with a weapon, where early on, a high base stat weapon is going to be much better. After the encounter with the Wyvern and the Mimic, we'll continue on through Lothric Castle going across the rooftops until we get to come across our first truly threatening enemy of the game, the Lothric Knights. These guys have far more complex movesets than any of the hollows, and for the most part, they can't be circle strafed either, like a DS1 enemy could. These guys are your introduction to enemies being a lot more dangerous. And I like that a lot. They're a pretty fun foe to fight. Another major set piece of the high wall is the big storage area, where you can find yourself some really useful items such as the Estus Shard and the Cell Key. The Estus Shard is extremely important for new players as it will increase the total number of Estus Flasks, and that means more heals going forward, and it's a permanent boost. And the Cell Key lets us save an NPC a bit later in the game, which we'll cover in a few minutes. Near the bottom of the high wall, you'll find a Fat Knight. I have nothing really to say, I just think he looks kind of funny, but I mean, if you want to, you could farm him to get his halberd, which isn't good, but it's not bad. More importantly though, when you reach the ground level part of high wall, you're going to want to take the first right, and you'll find yourself a gate you can open up as well as an elevator. This is important because, true to Dark Souls fashion, this is giving us a shortcut back to the first bonfire that we got when we, first got here. This is your shortcut you're going to be taking every time you want to go fight the boss, though really you're probably not going to need more than one attempt to beat him because he's honestly easier than Gundyr in my opinion. Before going to face the boss, you want to actually head up to the church where you will meet an old lady known as Emma. She's very kind, and hear her out.
The wait has been long, unkindled one. I am Emma, High Priestess of Lothric Castle. Allow me to speak frankly. You will not find the Lords of Cinder here. They have left, gone, to their journey homes converging at the base of this castle. Head to the bottom of the high wall, forge on through the great gate, and raise this banner to proceed. This farewell gift, it is the if you fear trespassers, then etch and the old unkindled will go through the but beware the vile.
Speaking with her is important as she'll give us a key item needed to progress and our first Covenant badge. However, it's 2025, so I won't really be bothering too much with Covenants, but it is cool that it's here. The last major thing is, with the handy dandy cell key in our hand, you're going to want to head down past the room with the explosive barrels, and you will find the locked up NPC. This is Grey Rat. He looks like the Thralls, but he's friendly and will talk to us, as well as giving us a new side quest to find a woman named Loretta. Remember this name, it'll be important in about 5 to 10 minutes. Now, let's go kill that boss. The vile watchdog of the Boreal Valley. Vort is our second boss of the game, and is a somewhat slower foe than Gundyr, instead focusing on heavy hits. His music is also a pretty big standout, as it's one of the game's few tracks composed by Motoi Sakuraba, the composer of Dark Souls 1, also composer for games like Star Ocean, Golden Sun, and Tales of Zestiria. Basically, he has two very distinct styles of music. As for the fight itself, Vort is more of a quadrupedal beast boss reminiscent of Bloodborne's boss catalog, with a lot of swipes and charging attacks. But it's not the fight that makes this battle notable, it's the music. However, while his theme is awesome and his visual design is cool, pun not intended, he's pathetically easy. The charge looks scary, but it's not that bad to dodge, and the deep battle axe will cut him down to size in under a minute, making this foe feel even frailer than Udex Gundyr, and given he's scripted to always go for a frost breath right after the charge, he's going to die before the song can even finish its climax. I still think it's a good boss, I just wish he had more health. After Vort is defeated, raise the flag up in order to get picked up by the Lordran taxi service, who's now relocated to Lothric after having to find new jobs. And with that, welcome one and all to the Undead Parish, one of the longest and most intricate areas in Dark Souls 3, and a location I wish I could say I liked, but sadly I don't really. It's a very long level, so I'll keep the information as easy to follow as possible as we speed through this place as best we can. Still gonna take a bit though. While the main way to make progress is going to be through the main gate, we actually want to turn left and go to the end of the broken bridge, where you'll meet a bunch of dead pilgrims, but there's a surviving one among them, and this is Yol of Londor. Has very little to say now, but he does act as an early game sorcery teacher, and has another function as well that you can also make use of in this game. You see, the Undead Parish isn't an area I enjoy, but it is an important area to explore thoroughly, as you'll find the main NPCs that teach. Otherwise, After you've found Yol, just run through the gate, snag the bonfire, and get ready for the long haul, boys and girls, because we're going to find a corpse with an item, spin it in midair. You want to cut it or shoot it down, and, well, now we know what happened to Loretta. The other big thing to note here is the large burn pile, as there's another Estus shard to pick up, and more healing is always useful for this journey. The enemies here are dangerous, so keep on hoofing it past them, as one thing you'll want to realize is Dark Souls 3, it's actually better not to fight every enemy you see, because in Dark Souls 3, everything is much faster and more aggressive, so knowing when to pick your battles are key, especially on limited resources. This isn't really the case in Dark Souls 2 because you had so many healing items you were never in danger of dying from lack of resources, and the slow and steady method was ideal. Here, it's all about knowing when to pick your battles. If you're entered up, you'll actually find yourself being invaded by a man named Hodrick, a Mad Phantom. Now, Mad Phantoms are weird because they are able to help you or hurt you, as they are essentially there to third party and kill a dude before peacing out. Unfortunately, due to the way it's implemented, they're basically just invaders but purple, because unless you're playing online in a PvP hotspot like Irithyll or the Ring City, you're basically the only target there for them to go after. I don't hate the idea of a Mad Phantom. I think it could work pretty well in a more active game, but the problem is Dark Souls 3 is kind of a dead game, and the Covenant's also a pain in the ass to actually get to. Now, after Hodrick, there is a few more things to keep in mind, because he marks a bit of a point of pay attention. You're going to see a tree with white branches. This is a warning sign, as this means you're about to get attacked by telephone poles launched into you if you're not careful. What I recommend here is to make that perilous jump and snag the Undead Bone Shard, then just GTFO. The Undead Bone Shard is very useful for upgrading the power of your Estus Flask, but be warned, you might not survive the return trip. After you've made it past the telephone poles, though, you might be surprised to know you can actually go fight the boss of the parish right now. But, just a quick spoilers, you won't be able to get out after you kill them, so I'd recommend holding off on fighting him for a bit and coming back here in a few minutes once we have a bonfire further in, and maybe some other progress made with the rest of this place. One of those important things is past where the boss is located, you can find a pyromancy teacher, but he's trapped in a cage, so how do we free him? Well, actually, he just warps out. He wasn't really trapped there to begin with, he was just bored. The Undead Parish also features an area with a big tower that has an elevator that only goes down, and a dude named Sigurd who is a bit kerfuffled about this. Well, guess what? You actually want to take that elevator down, and you're going to come across a new mini-boss, known as the Outrider Knight. Run past him and enter the next zone, known as the Road of Sacrifices, but we're just here to grab the bonfire. Now, kill the Outrider Knight for one of the better weapons in the game, especially in challenge runs, because the Irithyll Straight Sword does good damage, it has solid scaling, and it's able to inflict Frostbite, which, just like in Elden Ring, does a chunk of damage, lowers their stamina, and lowers their maximum defense. And, you know, you can use fire to reset it if you really want to. When you head back up, you'll realize that the elevator was actually a double elevator, so once you get on the top elevator, how many times did I say elevator, you'll be able to find the giant at the top who was firing the telephone poles at you. I recommend making friends with him, and you'll no longer have to deal with the telephone poles for the rest of the game. In fact, he'll actually help you at this point. Now, what you want to do after this is head down and drop off the elevator where Sigurd was humming and hawing, as you'll see him contemplating how to get around a Chaos Flame Demon. The answer is to Unga Bunga, and Sigurd will be terrified at your recklessness, but will valiantly charge into battle alongside you, so kick the demon's ass.
That was quite a performance, but you mustn't get in over your head. We unkindled must put... But, for the moment, we've a toast to make. To your valor, long may... Well, the only...
Our last major stop is near the Road of Sacrifices entrance, where you'll find a dude with a big hammer and there's a girl trapped in a cage. There's supposed to be some level design to deal with here to free her, but really you can just drop down and hope you don't go splat. Now, avoid getting mobbed by the rats, and you'll be able to get up and find Irina of Kareem. She's the miracle teacher of the game, and with that we now have access to all 3 available options for spells, barring offshoots like Dragon and Dark, so I guess it's time we go kill that boss. Entering the arena, you'll see that there's a bunch of villagers here worshipping this tree, but they're not actually the boss fight, as instead, once you get close enough, Wispy Woods is going to get pissed off and will attack you, revealing he's the real boss. Now, most of his body is invulnerable to damage. Instead, you're going to need to find the fleshy sacs on his body and his limbs, as they are the weak points, so get to attacking them. With a bit of abuse, they will pop into blood, which is very gross, and I guess the weird tree is the Tree of Men, but I'm not playing Salt and Sanctuary, I'm playing Dark Souls 3. Don't bother clearing out the enemies though, they infinitely spawn here, and also the tree will be more than happy to kill them for you. But be warned, because after enough punishment is delivered, the tree will break the floor as you fall to your death. Except you have no fall damage in this area for some reason, which is good because otherwise we'd probably be screwed, but the enemies don't exactly have that no fall damage buff, so they all get killed. In the final phase of the fight, Wispy Woods is going to get ticked off and sprout a giant fleshy arm to get you, but the MO of the fight is to continue as normal, attacking the flesh sacks until he dies. Though there is a big flesh sack and you can also attack the hand for damage if you really want to, I wouldn't recommend it. Think of this kind of like a base game Bloodborne boss because it's gross and its enjoyment is variable. But the reward for winning is worth it. Once again, this boss has a theme composed by Motoi Sakuraba, but I'm sorry to say, this one ain't it, Chief. It's by far the least interesting track in the game, just sounding like menacing boss.wav. But at least once you kill him, you will get your hands on the transposing kiln, a key item that I'll be making use of a little bit later in this video, and it's useful. I'll talk about it more later, though. Unfortunately, there's no way out of here, so you're going to need to warp to the nearest bonfire you've grabbed, so hope you've explored thoroughly, or even better, picked up the bonfire at the Road of Sacrifices. Now, normally the Great Wood would be where the chapter would end, but I'm going to be lumping the Road of Sacrifices in with the Undead Parish because there's nothing for me to really say about this area, and it doesn't deserve its own chapter. Road of Sacrifices can best be divided into 2 parts. The straight line at the beginning that we all run through, and the lake. So in short, just run the straight line until you reach the bonfire. At the bonfire, you're going to meet 2 friendly NPCs known as Henri and Horace. Talk with them and learn how they're hunting Aldrich. I forgot to exhaust their dialogue here, so I accidentally threw their questline out of whack, but I was able to thankfully salvage it before entering Irithyll. You probably already know this, but Henri's voice changes depending on your protagonist, as Henri is programmed to always be the opposite gender of your protagonist. Since Jackass is clearly the peak of masculinity, Henri will be a girl for this playthrough. Otherwise, I don't really have much to say about the Road of Sacrifices as a level, even when you get down to the lake. In short, there's a few items that are worth picking up here, as there is for every early game area, and you're going to get 2 points. You can either head right to reach Farron Keep, or you head left to reach the Cathedral of the Deep. Both are required to beat the game, so it's kind of a connecting hub. Honestly, I wish there was maybe a third area connecting it, then I think that would have helped it out a little bit. I should warn you, there are 2 very strong NPCs known as Exiles guarding the entrance to Farron Keep, but they do have a pretty cheeky and exploitable weakness you can make use of. What is that weakness, you may be asking? Well, that weakness is none other than gravity, the ultimate force in the Souls universe, because they will frequently attack themselves off the ledge and fall to their death. I do this every playthrough because it's hilarious. Also, the Exile Greatsword is generally considered one of the best weapons in the game, so it might be worth doing this early if you want to pick it up. Something I should mention is when you head back to Firelink Shrine once you've reached Road of Sacrifices, you will meet a girl called Cirrus of the Sunless Realm. She's another friendly face and the last of the 3 NPC questlines I'll really be bothering with, the others being Henri and Siegward. She warns us about the Fingers, aka the Invasion Covenant asshats of the game, and she will periodically show up in Firelink throughout the game to give helpful advice and or possibly lend you a hand in some way or another. Now, we could do Fair and Keep, but for difficulty progression and just for how that difficulty curve goes, I'd advise instead you head left at the lake and get ready for the next boss fight. The next boss on the chopping block is the Crystal Sage, and Crystal Sage is a boss capable of either being very easy or very difficult. Do not play passive in this boss fight because you won't outlast him, but don't overextend either as he can hit like a truck. Being a sage, he naturally has a lot of sorcery at his disposal, including an attack that will actually fly up into the sky and rain down on top of you to stop you from camping. I actually like that attack a lot, not gonna lie. It does give the fight a little bit more dynamicism. The Crystal Sage doesn't move like most bosses. He doesn't really move around a lot. Instead, he's going to warp to set points in the arena, and at half health, things become more dangerous as he'll summon in clones to attack you, similar to Fool's Idol or Pinwheel. But the difference here is that the Sage isn't a failure, as the copies also take up strategic positions, and while they may only have 1 health, they can still hurt enough to not be ignored, and the copies can be distinguished from the originals by the use of blue magic instead of purple, and having a slightly lighter coloration, being more gray instead of like a black. Overall, while I by no means love this boss, I do think he's good. In the first fight in the game, I'd say beating out Udex Gundyr. For those who haven't seen my boss ranking, I have Udex put as the barrier to entry for being a good boss, which most foes will clear in this game. Before we really get heading off, now that we have 20k souls in our inventory, now is actually a pretty good time to purchase the tower key from the old lady, as this will allow us to explore the rest of the Cemetery of Ash and collect some goodies, such as an Estus Shard, the Firekeeper Soul, a Serpent Ring, and access to Pickle Pea and Pumperum, the magic crows of the game that like to trade you their items. Lots of stuff to pick up, and I'd say it's a good time to do so now, but if you're short on souls, don't worry. There will be an easy way to get 20k souls after we kill the next boss. The other big thing you want to make sure you do if you haven't already done so is give Ludlith the transposing kiln, because he will allow us to make boss weapons. At this point, they are kind of niche, but the Hollow Slayer Greatsword is a fantastic weapon for those builds that can work with it because it slays hollows and those afflicted by the abyss, meaning it does extra damage to a lot of enemies in this game, including a very certain super boss. Alright, now with preparations done, buckle up, because this chapter we're going to be tackling the Cathedral of the Deep, one of the most involved parts of the game, level design wise, and widely considered the best early game level in Dark Souls 3 by a lot. And I'd agree, the place is awesome, but first we gotta actually get inside, so try not to get murdered by the enemies, fight off 2 NPCs, and make your way inside the church, but also see just how absurd Dark Souls 3 is with its teleporting dogs. It's not just a meme, guys, it's real. The Dark Souls 3 dogs are the worst in the series. The wolves are fine though. Now that we're in the cathedral proper, it's time to begin exploring. I say ignore the crazy old man, he was added post-launch and therefore does not exist yet for the sake of this video. All the doors are locked, and the gimmick of the cathedral is it all centers around a single bonfire, much like another level in this game, actually, now that I think about it. Anyways, so we have to run through the graveyard, up the hill, and it's just going to be filled with infinitely respawning enemies, but they're very passive, so you can kind of just run past them. This is another point where the game says, yeah, don't fight everything, it's not worth it. I would recommend maybe carrying a torch in your sidearm just to be safe though, because this area is home to these weird leech monsters that will inflict a steady buildup of bleed after they grab you. And I also say you should explore the graveyard thoroughly, as it has a bunch of cool things like the Astora Greatsword, my personal favorite weapon in Dark Souls 3, but there's also a lot of other great items to pick up, like another Estus Shard upgrade, the Poison Bite Ring, the Curse Ward Great Shield, and many more once we actually get inside. Not gonna lie, this rooftop segment of the game is actually really cool looking visually, though I will admit this is where you're going to learn to hate the thralls if you didn't already, because they will be dropping from seemingly out of nowhere if you're not being very observant. Holy shit. Inside the cathedral, you'll come across a bunch of different enemies, but none of them are more imposing than the giants. These guys do not screw around. They honestly could be mini-bosses, actually they are mini-bosses in their own right. So there's a couple ways you can handle them. You can either choose to sneak on past them or shoot arrows at them. I personally recommend just shooting a bunch of arrows at them because when they die, they won't respawn, and that gives you free reign to pretty much just pick up the items without any issues. And you'll want to do that because one of those items is the Lloyd Sword Ring, a significant buff to your attack when at full health. It's not perfect, mind you, but I'll always prefer a full health bonus over a low health bonus, and you get this way earlier than you'll get Red Tearstone Ring. But honestly, from where you got the sword ring, you could totally just drop down to the bottom and head straight to the boss if you wanted. I won't be doing that for this video, but you can. There's also another mini-boss you'll find in this area when going through some of the different rooms. It's this giant spider monkey dude that has Death Blight and can be an issue to deal with, but the thing is, he can't go through the hallways, so the smartest strategy is to just camp him out here. And if this seems cheap, I mean it is, but don't worry, we'll get a chance to fight one later in the game, which you can't cheese out, and you'll get to see more what he can do there. I actually do highly recommend embering up throughout this area because you want to get invaded by the NPC Longfinger Kirk, also known as Kirk the Knight of Thorns from Dark Souls 1. He's a cheeky opponent that has damaging dodge rolls, and more importantly, slaying him gets us the Barbed Straight Sword, a decently strong and fusible weapon with the added benefit of having a bleed build-up. Easily one of the best weapons in the game, with very low stat requirements, being able to work for practically any build thanks to it being infusible and having stats that are just barely above level 1. Overall, I'd say the Cathedral is one of those levels that upon a first playthrough feels kind of intimidating with its very intricate design and only a single bonfire, but once you've gotten a bit more used to it, you realize it's just kind of two circles on top of each other. It's not bad. I really like the way the level layout is, but it's not that hard to deal with. Most important thing you want to do is take the elevator and go up on the roofs. That way we can, let's say, meet with a particular fellow. Before we go fight the boss, we meet Sigurd of Katarina again? But, you know, something seems a little bit off here, especially with the way he talks. I don't know, listen to him.
Well, you look reasonably sane. I am a knight of Katarina. I've managed to track down this cathedral right over there. Treasure. I'm in quite a pickle.
Shame on you, you greedy guts. Thought you could outwit an onion. Well, say hello to the nice giant. He adores visitors. Where's the old giant? What? Where's the bloody giant? How dare you? Have you no shame?
Where's the giant, Mansley?
Yep, Patches is back to being Patches again, and we have to go over to him via the rafters in the ceiling. Now, I could talk to him and purchase the armor off for an extortionist amount of souls, but you know what? I don't feel like it. I'm just gonna kill him. We're just murdering Patches today. He's dying now. There is actually a purpose to coming here other than just murdering Patches, as beating him will give you, well, It won't give you anything other than the armor, which you don't have to buy off him, but it will allow you to reach the area where you are able to access and join Rosaria's Covenant, which is the PvP invasion covenant of the game. I will not be joining it for this playthrough as that screws up one of the quest lines. I do, however, want to mention that it's important to come over here because beating Kirk means you can get his Armor of Thorns, which is nice because damaging dodge rolls is always a cheeky little strategy, even if it doesn't do much. Rosaria acts also as a way for the player to redo their appearance however they wish, as well as respect their stats. And there's a bonfire here, and as far as I know, these actions will not void Sirius's questline. It's only if you give a pale tongue to the fingers. But I will not be using her services for this playthrough, though. Oh, and one last thing, once you get the armor from Patches, either by buying it off of him or killing the shit out of him, go back to the well right outside of the cathedral bonfire, as we'll be able to find the owner at the bottom of it.
I'm in quite a pit. Maybe I can fashion a replacement from in there. I've got to use my head and think. Oh, my armor. My deepest gratitude. I, Siegfried of Katarina, salute you. With my trusty suit of armor, I'll be out of here in a jiffy. Until we meet.
Let's fight the boss, shall we? Though, temper your expectations, because were you expecting to face off with Aldrich? Too bad, it's time to fight the deacons. Being a practicing Christian, I remind these men of the cloth that practicing idolatry is a bad thing. They responded by throwing fireballs at me, so I guess we're choosing violence today. Now, there will always be a deacon with a red aura playing hot potato with it throughout the boss fight. You're going to need to take out the aura deacons, I believe 5 times in order to progress the fight, and that'll keep you moving around the arena in order to face off with the different foes. It's got a bit of a Dynasty Warriors Musou field. You're just slaughtering all the enemies. It's kind of fun. After causing enough of a ruckus, the bishop came out to greet me and remind me that as Christians, we should do our best to be like Jesus. If he insists. Now, the last things of note here are, for beating the boss, you will get the small doll, which you need to progress the game, and the Deacon Soul, which isn't very good, but it's a free 20k when popped, so that can get you the tower key if you don't have it already. The boss theme also stands out as it's the only track in the game composed by Nobuyoshi Suzuki as opposed to Yuka Kitamura or Motoi Sakuraba. Before we really get going into Fair and Keep, I highly recommend you pick up a dagger if you haven't already done so. No need to upgrade it, but it will save you a lot of time. As you can see, Fair and Keep isn't the most welcoming location. Unfortunately, as much as we all dread the poison swamps, running to the end of this area is not an option, as you need to explore it thoroughly for 3 islands of sorts that have sconces you need to light up in order to access the boss at the end. On top of that, there's also some items you're really going to want to pick up here. The enemies, known as the Gru, are absolute bastards to deal with, and overall, this is, in my opinion, the worst level in the game. Thankfully, however, the worst level in Dark Souls 3 is like a middle-of-the-road Demon Souls level, or, in other words, I don't enjoy it, but it's not a part I actively dread like Tomb of the Giants, Frigid Outskirts, or Valley of Defilement. There's actually 2 parts of this place I kind of enjoy. Unfortunately, before that, you gotta light the sconces, so hopefully you got a dagger, as it will allow you to dagger step through the swamp, which lets you move much faster without really any penalty. I mean, yes, it costs MP, but even when your MP reaches 0, you're not going to really be missing anything. Don't even try to fight the big guys in this area. They are stronger than the boss of the region, which is weird. The big thing you're going to want to keep an eye out for in Fair and Keep is this ladder in the middle of the swamp, as it serves 2 purposes. There's also another upgrade that's like very close to it, but more importantly, you want to climb it for some extremely helpful goodies and a bonfire, which can be useful in case you get lost. Having another checkpoint or another starting place is always good. This also has the Farron Watchdog Covenant, which is another PvP focused covenant, but instead of being an invasion one, it's a dueling focused one. So I guess you could consider them like not complete and total assets. It's up to you if you decide you want to join it or not. But what you really want to come up here for is this hidden wall that you can go through, as it will allow you to get the Dream Chaser's Ashes. An item needed to continue Cirrus's questline, but more importantly, giving it to the Handmaiden will give you the ability to purchase Titanite normally. That's always nice. But there's also an elevator we can take that'll let us go up even further. At the top of the bridge, we get a blast from the past as we have a mini-boss fight against the Stray Demon. Yeah, that boss from Dark Souls 1 complete with club slams and ass crashes. Don't be fooled though by his lack of a health bar. This guy is basically a full-blown boss fight, and had this been released one game later, he would have been counted as one. That's the main reason though I'd say you want to come up here, because first off, it gives you some good souls when you beat him, and second off, defeating him will get you his Demon Soul, which can be turned into Havel's Ring from Dark Souls 1. Not quite as busted as it was there, but still the equip load boost is very nice to have, especially if you want to go for slightly heavier builds, or if you want to use a greatsword and don't want to risk fat rolling or running around with no armor. After you've finished lighting the sconces, it's basically just a straight line to the end, running through the big gate, but if you immediately hang right, you'll not only find a bonfire, but there will be even more to explore past the bonfire, or at least a little bit to explore past the bonfire. See, there's actually a bit of important stuff you can get back here, including a crystal lizard that needs killing, a gate that loops back to the Road of Sacrifices, and the actually quite useful Farron Coal, as this gives you another way to infuse your weapons, which allows for different types of weapon builds. Farron Coal also has some other uses, such as providing some extra lore, but more importantly, what's guarding it is our old friend the Black Knight from Dark Souls 1. Though, he is mercifully a good bit easier than his Dark Souls 1 counterpart due to the much faster movement of your character, and the fact that these guys don't have infinite poise this time around. They're still dangerous, but they're by no means the world-beating mini-bosses that are going to haunt your nightmares.
Wasn't he? Used to forge the weapons of Farron's Abyss Watchers. A fine prize. I'm honored to be endued with it. Now I'll be equipped to infuse special gems. Praise the gods, eh? Time to put this brawn to use. Well, well. What's the Undead Legion doing with a coal such as this? I'd heard one of the Crystal Sages had sided with Farron's Abyss Watchers. I suppose it must be true. You should know, this coal is imbued with magic. First one I've ever seen. Hardly a surprise, is it? I've never been one for books or wise men.
At this point, I should warn you, Yol of Londor is about to die, so I highly recommend getting the 5 free level ups out of him if you haven't already done so. Your character will hollow afterwards, but the Firekeeper's Soul can cleanse it permanently, and you got that from the Tower Key, so you don't need to worry about any questline issues. I mentioned this because I did not take advantage of this, and yeah, I ended up basically screwing myself out of a few free levels. Huh. First time I've ever had a boss have the decency to kill the other enemies for me. Anyways, say hello to your first Lord of Cinder, the Abyss Watchers. Though, what I said there was a bit of a joke, because after a few seconds, it turns out these Watchers are kind of immortal and will rise back from the grave to get back in on the fight. And then, as more time passes, a third one will join in, with Red Eyes. But Red Eyes Black Dragon is on no one's side and will kill the other Watchers just as much as they want to kill you, so your main target is the Boss Watcher with the Boss Health Bar, but if you ever feel the need to tag out and fight the Side Watcher leaving the Boss Watcher to Red Eyes, don't be afraid to do so. He's not on your side, but you're not his priority. It can be a bit of a chaotic juggling match, but it can still be kind of fun, and with the low HP, this fight shouldn't last too terribly long. You may have felled the leader Watcher, but the fight isn't over because the blood of all the Watchers will converge into Red Eyes, and now you've got your main boss. Once again, at 1548 HP, he's not the bulkiest opponent in the world, but when you consider that his first health bar also had this much, he's got a bit more vitality than you might think. Abyss Watchers is a boss with a lot of extra fire effects going on as well, which aren't just there to look cool, but they serve a purpose, as they will require proper directional dodging to avoid damage. It's not as strict as later bosses in the series or even in this game, but it generally means there is a wrong answer. In short, roll sideways for the trails and backwards for the leaping explosions. Overall, I think the Abyss Watchers act as a great early game foe and a fun first Lord Ascender, but one other fun fact is the battle between the Dark Wraiths and Gru aren't just an aesthetic thing, but also can serve a mechanical purpose, as they'll kill each other, giving you souls as the fight goes on, and more importantly, they can drop an Estus Flask charge, so if you're ever wondered why you mysteriously regained an Estus in the middle of the fight, that's why. Welcome to the Catacombs of Carthus, where the spooky, scary skeletons send shivers down your spine, and to be honest, I don't have much to say about the Catacombs of Carthus. You just drop down the side, run to some stairs, deal with a skeleton rolling ball that heads back up, kill the skeleton mage to stop the ball, grab a bone shard, then run through it until you get to the end. So, honestly, instead, I kind of want to talk about a little bit of other stuff while we're going through it. So as I mentioned earlier, Yul's going to die once you make too much progress, so if you want to get those Dark Sign levels, now would be the time to do it. Here's the weird thing though, information involving Yul seems to vary heavily. The way he works is that he teaches basic sorceries, but he'll also draw out the power of the Dark Sign, allowing for essentially 5 free levels at the cost of you becoming hollow. This is part of his questline needed for the Lord of Hollows ending, and after he draws out the power of the Dark Sign 5 times, he will die. You can permanently cure the hollowing with the Firekeeper soul obtained from use of the Tower Key, but information on when Yul dies seems to be kind of a mess. Some say he dies as soon as the Catacombs of Carthus text pops up, other information says he dies when you cross the big bridge near the end, and some say he dies when you kill the boss of the area. In short, if you're going to do his questline or go for Lord of Hollows, just get his stuff done before you kill Abyss Watchers. I say this because I failed to do so and missed out on some free levels. I also missed a bit of Henri's questline and forgot to exhaust her dialogue at Road of Sacrifices and Firelink Shrine, but thankfully that's fairly easy to fix as long as we don't go too far. I will show it off a little bit, but the big things you want to know are you want to talk to her, exhaust her dialogue at the Road of Sacrifices, then she will go to Firelink where you want to talk to her there. After that, you talk to her at the start of the Catacombs of Carthus, where, before the ball rolling, and then you talk to her a second time near the end of the Catacombs of Carthus, where you'll have like this little cliff area overlooking a bridge. I'll go into more details when we get to that part and it becomes relevant. There is one other major set piece here, and that is actually the second skeleton ball, where once you kill the skeleton mage, you want to run your butt back down to find the truth of what's really powering these skeleton balls. A singular crab. Why is a crab here? Vadi, I need my lore video. Near the end of the catacombs, you'll find a sign telling you that the bridge is starting to wear thin. Take my advice here, run for it. Not only is the bridge going to start collapsing from under you very quickly, but you're about to get mobbed by a horde of angry skeletons that would be more than happy to take you out, because guess what? They've got a bone to pick with you. If you're not careful, they'll cut the bridge out from under you, or just mob you to death because there's like 30 of these guys. But if you are able to take the bridge out on them, then they will fall to their death, and you get a pretty comedic cutscene of what looks like almost a Tom and Jerry bit. So, who's ready for the easiest boss in the game? Now, there is a cheese strat to kill this guy in 30 seconds, but I think his intro is at least cool enough to deserve a point or two, so I usually let it play out here. Now, as for the fight itself, it's simply a game of whack the weak spots, like Great Wood, but the difference is the weak spots aren't all over his body, instead they're on his arms. Yeah, there's not a lot going on here, and this fight is a joke, but if I have any major advice, it would probably be take out the bracelet on the right hand first, as that's one is going to spend a lot of its time in the blue mist, which can damage you and make things a bit riskier. With that in mind, this fight is a joke you can end in under a minute, and I guess he's supposed to be able to summon minions, but he never did it for me, and this just kind of made for a laughable boss fight that is kind of weird how this guy is what immediately will follow the Abyss Watchers without fail. Like, you have to beat Abyss Watchers to even get to this guy, and I don't know. If you look at his stats, the idea of 15,000 HP sounds monstrous, especially for such an early game foe, but when you think about it, the only thing that matters are the bracelets. So really, his health is like 3. It's like Bed of Chaos all over again. Now, a few things to mention. Going to Irothil will act as a bit of a point of no return where major changes occur in the game world, though mostly this is just questline related stuff, so it's not going to be too much gameplay impact. All the tomes you've picked up throughout the game can be given to your various teachers, however occult tomes are kind of a big no-no. Basically either the teacher will outright refuse it, or you have to force it onto them, and that ends up being bad for their health. Don't worry though, we will meet someone that can safely teach us dark magic later on, and I mention this because you got that occult pyromancy from the Wolnir boss fight. You'll also see at the bottom of the ladder, which was the broken bridge, that yeah, you can actually take that down, and it's going to lead to a secret area. Down here, we'll actually see there's another fire demon, just like the one we found in the Undead Parish, except this time no Sigurd to help us out. Instead, there's some skeletons that spawn in down there, and you can also make the fire demon aggro the Mimic. It's interesting, and it's kind of funny to see how they'll fight each other, because sometimes the Mimic will actually put up a pretty good fight against the demon, but a lot of the time it's just going to get completely destroyed because its AI is stupid. Kill or run past the demon and say hello to Smoldering Lake, an area that's not really that fun. There's basically nothing major of value here outside of some collectibles. Like, you can get some Titanite, which is really good, and there's a lot of large Titanite chunks large Titanite shards you can find around here, so that'll be helpful for upgrading your weapons. But mostly you're going to be coming down here for an optional boss fight and a quest line. The first thing you want to do is hang right, and you'll want to go into a small cave where Horus went missing, and Unfortunately, he has hollowed out. We don't really have any peaceful solution here. The only real option is to kill him, so I just say, make it quick. Now, with Horace dead, go talk to Henri, who's back up over that cliff edge near the drawbridge, and you want to tell them something. I should warn you though, don't tell them where Horace is unless you've killed them. Otherwise, when you go down there, you'll find out that he ended up murdering her. But if Horace has died, then you go return to where Horace is, you'll find that there was a burial marked for him, along with a prism stone, a sign that she was here. Though oddly, the dialogue will still act like she couldn't find Horace when you speak to her in Idolatry. Maybe that was just a glitch in my playthrough, I had a couple of them, or maybe that was just an oversight with the programming. The last big set piece in Smoldering Lake is the giant worm mini-boss that, yeah, you can basically just completely ignore. The big thing about him is going to be that, yeah, he's supposed to shoot out lightning and be this big giant threat, possibly a demon, I'm not entirely sure. But you can just kind of sit there and let the Arbalest shoot him, and he'll kill him for you. And on doing so, you'll also get yourself a miracle and some bone ash, which is nice because, hey, boosted healing is always good. There is a super intricate area beneath Smoldering Lake, but it's really not fun or that worthwhile to run through, so I will show you the highlight of going down there. By the way, that's how you get the Fume Ultra Greatsword. You have to kill that NPC that does the My Thanks pose when you randomly die. Now, as for our boss fights, the Old Demon King is our first optional boss of the game that actually feels like an optional boss. Technically, the Curse Rod at Greatwood was optional, but they were on the required path and gives access to boss weapons, which is kind of an essential feature. But this is one that you'll find when delving into the deepest depths of Lothric, discovering the remainder of the demons, or lack thereof. He has a massive club, but he still puts up a solid fight for new players and returning ones that get careless because he's also a master of pyromancy. He's also the first boss in the game with 3 full phases, although phase 3 is more like a victory lap than a proper fight, but phase 1 has him focusing primarily on physical attacks, while phase 2 shows the mastery he has gained over the old Chaos Flame as the strongest living pyromancer. But when he gets low at health, he'll gather all his power into an explosion to unleash one ultimate blast of fire, and that's basically it. He's got nothing left in the tank after that explosion, and at that point you've reached phase 3, which is more or less a formality as you just kind of whack whatever remaining life he has out of him. It's a cool optional boss fight though, and I like it a lot. Now, I have to be honest, these levels have been kind of a mixed bag so far, and the boss is not quite as mixed bag, but still a little bit mixed. I'm happy to say the worst of that is behind us, as welcome to the mid-game. Welcome to Idolatry of the Boreal Valley, and I'm happy to say the bad levels are pretty much behind us, but I'm also going to warn you, look out behind you, because you're being watched. Say hello to the Sullivan Beast, one of the watchdogs of the not-so-good Pontificate, and basically a reskinned watchdog boss from Bloodborne's Chalice dungeons. He's not too hard to deal with, but he can be dangerous for the unprepared player. However, there's 2 ways to handle him. You can either run past him and get past a barrier as long as you have the doll, or you can kill him here. If you choose to kill him here, you will be given the Pontiff's right eye. This has the benefit of boosting your attack when you continuously attack the enemy. In other words, it rewards players for maintaining a combo, and it can be pretty useful. After using your newfound souls to level up, and make sure you have the doll in your inventory from the cathedral or you're not making it past that barrier, my controller ended up disconnecting before I then got invaded by a player in 2025. What the fuck? Also, the Fred Toucher is playing Persona 4 Golden. So much that he had to tell me twice. Unfortunately, I don't have the best internet in general, so yeah, this is also Dark Souls 3 PvP, so it was laggy and awkward, but when parrying is not an option, the Unga Bunga sword works quite well. With that out the way, Irithyll itself is actually a pretty straightforward area if you think of it as 3 separate zones, because they all have their distinct level design and enemy selection with surprisingly little overlap of thematics. And by the way, Fred Toucher is playing Persona 4 Golden. Now, for the sake of our quest line, the most important stop here is going to be the Church of Yorshka. Not only is there a bonfire that is very useful, this is also where the final determining factor in Henri's quest line will happen, as well as a possible ending you can get. If you want the Lord of Hollows ending, talk with Henri, then continue as normal throughout the playthrough. However, if you wish to complete her quest line in the satisfying way, this is important. Check the area thoroughly, and in the corner, there will be a pilgrim, but all you see is a statue. Well, that's because of the chameleon spell. This pilgrim has to die for Henri to live past the next boss fight, so if you want to get the end of the questline I'm going for, get to killing. For taking her out though, you will get the chameleon spell, allowing you to become the worst boss in Kirby Superstar. Why did I write that? Oh, no, actually this just turns you into one of the environmental items, so you can play prop hunt one of the invaders. It's a lot more fun though in Dark Souls 2 where you can move at Mach 2. Here you just kind of move around, like, very slowly. Anyways, at this point you'll also get the chance to send Greyrat out to Irithyll, and he'll return after you kill the boss. Here's the problem though, if Sigurd is not in Irithyll, or Patches is not alive and still with the onion armor, Greyrat will die. Normally this is not an issue, however, I killed the shit out of Patches and had some weird quest flag progression with Sigurd where after I talked to him, he left Irithyll early, so unfortunately Greyrat is going to end up dying on this file. Personally, I just choose to see this as Patches getting his revenge from beyond the grave or wherever the hell his ass is at right now. Now, as much as I like Irithyll as a level, it does have one big issue. It's home to the worst dogs in the series, with their weird-ass human heads. These guys have teleporting capabilities that rival a DBZ character, and they are not fun opponents if you're not prepared. Getting down into the water area of the game, you want to keep running across the lake to find a distant manor bonfire, as this connects to another part of Irithyll and also gives us a useful checkpoint. And if you haven't yet killed the Sullivan beast on the bridge, it's going to come down here to attack you. If you're doing Sirius's quest line after you've killed the Sullivan's beast and made it down to the distant manor bonfire, you're going to want to warp back up to the bridge where you originally fought the beast, and you'll see her summon sign requesting assistance, as you'll get into a battle to take down Crichton, that dude from Dark Souls 2 that was known for being an asshat. Unfortunately, Sirius is no match for Crichton on her own, and if she dies you have to start over, so honestly, just treat him like you should any Dark Souls 3 PvP opponent, or I guess NPC opponent, and just cheese him out. You're not getting any honorable fights here.
Thank you for your kind assistance. Blessing of the moon upon your journey.
Now continuing through the waterway, after you get through the sewer bit, you will see a friendly face once again.
Excuse me, I must have dozed off. It's rather warm in here. Well, hasn't it been all too long? It's good to see you. Oh, I seem to have missed my chance, so I, Siegfried of Katarina, offer my deepest gratitude, and a little surprise to go with it. It's all yours. I know. Won't you join me for dinner? I'll make a fine Leicester soup. I've got some stewing right now. You and we undead deserve a little normalcy from time to time. And finally, upon this rendezvous, let us make a toast. To your valor, my sword, and our sworn duties. Have you heard? Somewhere, hidden right here in Irithyll, is a deep dungeon. And even below that, the profaned capital, home of Yorm, the reclusive giant lord. That reminds me, I've a grave promise to keep. Oh, sorry. I'm afraid I've cast a cloud over things. Well, I'm going to have myself a little nap. The only thing to do, really, after a nice toast.
Now, this next room looks familiar. A little too familiar, actually. Yeah, we've got a Silver Knight running straight at us, ready to attack us. Returning from Dark Souls 1, though thankfully they're a little bit easier because you can stun lock them, but at the same time they're a little bit more dangerous because they can now buff their weapons with lightning and things like that. Oh, and by the way, the Fred Toucher is playing Persona 4 Golden. There's really not much left to say about Irithyll after the waterway and the fan service area. You're pretty much at the end of it. Just be ready to deal with the one Irithyll Knight in the game that has a scythe, and it's able to also inflict frostbite, which is kind of dangerous. And by the way, the Fred Toucher is playing Persona 4 Golden. Now, you actually want to head back to Firelink after you've taken out Crichton, as Cirrus will have some more dialogue for you, and she'll also give you the Silver Cat Ring, which reduces fall damage. This is very helpful in more vertically oriented levels in the game, which we'll be going to fairly soon. And overall, it's just you get a bit of nice extra dialogue from her. I like it. Anyways, I guess it's time we go kill the boss. Also, you get a mail breaker, but who cares? It's a mail breaker. Say hello one and all to the skill check of the game, kind of. If you know how to parry or keep your dodge rolls in check, Pontiff will be beaten very easily, but if you can't parry and panic dodge a lot, this man is going to put you through the ringer. He has both fire and magic damage as well as a shadow clone that can telegraph his big moves in phase 2. I honestly wish I could give more advice here, but I just kinda steamrolled his ass, so enjoy the beating. Fun fact, he's the main antagonist of the story and was originally planned to be the final boss of the game. We just killed him and we're only halfway through it. With the Pontiff dead, we have two different directions we can go in, and while your instincts may say to just head right past his boss arena, I actually recommend going down to the Distant Manor bonfire, especially if you're doing Secret's questline, and getting this area done first for the sake of story and spoilers for those who haven't played, but our next two bosses are both Lords of Cinder, and after you kill the third Lord of Cinder, you're forcibly warped away, which would end Sigurd's questline without the final cutscene, and yeah, it's kinda weird. Plus, difficulty-wise, I think this way offers better pacing. Now, welcome to Irithyll Dungeon, our next level of the game that lacks a boss fight, and like Cathedral of the Deep, it is going to focus entirely around a single bonfire, but unlike Cathedral of the Deep, I'm not the biggest fan of this level. Don't get me wrong, it certainly has some
good atmosphere,
but I just don't think it's the most fun to actually play through for a couple of reasons. First off, those leech guys are back from the cathedral and they're just as grabby as ever, as well as the addition of the cage jerks from the parish. But the real thing that sucks are the wardens, or I guess the jailers, as they have two major moves. They have a smoke that can slow the player down, making them vulnerable to the branding iron, and then they have the Gaze of Demise, which drains your maximum HP down to 1, making you even easier to kill in a dungeon where enemies will randomly lash out at you from cells for a bit of chip damage. This wouldn't be a terrible gimmick, but unfortunately any health drain stays gone even when the health bar restores itself over time, so if you went down to 1 HP, you'd be stuck at 1 HP. Though I wonder, does that mean you could technically run both Void Sword Ring and Red Tearstone Ring at 1 HP? Food for thought. The other big issue is, outside of just the atmosphere and the jailers, there's not too much to say about the dungeon, because there's no real boss fight or anything major here. The biggest thing, I guess, to mention is near the end you'll find a bunch of husks of armor, meditating in with what looks like a petrified half-dragon human creature. Remember that for later. Then there's the room. You know, that place with like 8 freaking jailers roaming around, and if you try to run through it, you get mobbed to death. I hate this room. It has one of the most important things to come back to for the game as well, and it has one of the absolute meanest fail conditions. We'll talk about that when it's relevant. This room holds 4 jail cells, 3 of which hold enemies such as rats, baby monster dragon things, and one of those berserker guys from the Road of Sacrifices that's supposed to attack the jailers, but he doesn't. The final jail cell contains the last major NPC we need to save, and if you open her cell then die before finishing her dialogue, she'll be permanently killed, locking you out of her assistance for the rest of the playthrough. So when we come back here with the key to save her, just kill everything in sight, don't let it live. When you see the long bridge at the end, rejoice as the area is almost over. Just make sure you get past the gargoyle, because he will try to hurt you, but you can run past him pretty easily. And thankfully, I don't think I've ever actually died to him. Just be mindful of the drop here, otherwise you might take a lot of damage if you're not careful. But when you get to the end, make sure you take this ladder up and you will find a bonfire letting you know that the Idolatry dungeon is over, which your first time on a playthrough is probably a nightmarish hellscape. On a second playthrough onwards is about a 6-minute inconvenience. And guess what? Even better, you'll find a bone ash, or bone shard, and the corpse of Laddersmith Gilligan from Dark Souls 2. Rest in piss, you extortionist. So, welcome to our next dungeon, the Profane Capital. What you want to do is head down the stairs, and you'll see there's a fog wall you can enter almost right away. And wait, Yorm already? Yeah, you can actually kill the next Lord of Cinder and fight him right now if you really want to. You're not going to stand much of a chance because his health bar is massive, but you could totally do it. Although, you can also just grab the Storm Ruler and cheese him out with a little bit of clever menuing, so, you know. The big thing is, though, we're not really supposed to be here yet, so I'm going to warp out and show you the rest of the Profane Capital, because 90% of it's optional. We do want to explore some. The most notable thing is there's this area with an NPC mage that can be quite powerful. You also want to keep this rooftop in mind because there's an important secret you can find here, and below there's a bit of poison, but it's not enough to really classify it as a full-blown poison swamp, so it's not getting a point on the counter. There's also some of these weird hippo monster hand things. They're not really hippos, but I guess they kind of are. Before Elden Ring just put in an actual hippo as a boss. And there's more mimics because it's Dark Souls 3, so of course there's freaking mimics here. There's also a pretty diabolical little trap here with 2 jailers that are actually stealthily hidden. You have no way of seeing them, but you can hear them if you listen closely, and they are going to try and ambush you if you go further. The reason why they're here? Well, because this is where you'll find the key needed to unlock some jail cells, which is how you can free a prisoner or 2, and we really want to do that because one of them is to finish up Sigurd's questline, and the other is to save our final major NPC. Now with that key ring in hand, it's actually not super obvious, but you want to get on the roof and you want to look to where you can see a window that's open. You actually need to jump through that, and Dark Souls 3 jumping is definitely a little bit weird, but I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world, at least it's kind of responsive. The reason we want to come here is because this is where you will find Sigurd locked up. Freeing him will allow us to finish up his questline, as well as net us our first Titanite slab, a very useful and very limited resource needed to max out weapons in Dark Souls 3, and in Dark Souls 3 there's a set number of them.
You are a saint. Once again, you are my valiant savior. I, Siegfried of Katarina, express my deepest gratitude. Take this, a token of my thanks. No,
With the jailer's keyring in hand, go back to that room with way too many jailers and murder literally all of them so we can now unlock the door and safely talk with our final major NPC of the game, Carla.
Oh, there you are. I thought you'd all but forgotten me. How sweet. Good to know that a skinny little heretic can still turn heads. Oh, you're not one of them, are you? Accept my apologies for mistaking you for one of those leeches. So, what business have you here? This is a land of monstrosities. And I am no exception. You're here to save me. But I'm guilty. A wretched child of the abyss. Is that something you can forgive? Oh, really? You are no ordinary man. Very well. Besides, I've grown tired of imprisonment. I am Carla, and I accept your proposal.
Carla is unique as an NPC as she is a daughter of Manus, the DLC final boss of Dark Souls 1 and kind of the big bad of that game, and I guess technically this trilogy as a whole since he's the father of the Abyss. However, she seems to have taken a page from Alsana by not being evil and actually quite nice. As a child of the Abyss, she's able to teach you the dark magic of the game and the hexes without needing any coaxing and no risk of negative effects on your spell teachers. Ultimately, she can teach you any spell in the game as well, so if you messed up or missed an NPC or two, here you go. Though she does have an aversion to miracles and gets scared when you show her a divine tomb, so maybe be careful about showing her those. With that handled, I think it's time, so let's get ready to go face off with our second Lord of Cinder.
Old friend. I, Siegward of the Knights of Katarina, have come to uphold my promise. Let the sun shine upon this Lord of Cinder. It seems I am in your debt once again. My thanks. I could have not kept my promise without you. Now, for a final toast. To your valor, and my old friend Yorm. Long may the sun shine. Well, I'm going to have myself a little nap. The only thing to do, really, after a nice toast. You are a true friend. Best of luck with your duty. Well, you are...
So, you've seen what happens when you go down, but now where we need to go is up and past Pontiff Sullivan's boss arena, as this is how we'll progress the game, and if you're online, prepare to get invaded, because the upper areas of Irithyll are by far the most invasion-heavy part of Dark Souls 3, thanks to it being the original PvP arena before the actual PvP arenas were made a thing. And there's also a special covenant here called the Eldritch Faithful that can spawn in. The Eldritch Faithful can be compared to the Darkroot Covenant from Dark Souls 1 or the Bell Covenant from Dark Souls 2. And I guess also the Rat Covenant, but does anyone care about the Rat King? Anyways, yeah, so this place can be kind of tough. There's also the giants here, but you've gotten this far, you probably realize by now, we don't fight giants in a fair 1v1, silly. You cheese them out like a coward. Also, this was the only time in this playthrough I got grabbed by a mimic, and I actually managed to survive it. Man, these guys have really fallen off from Dark Souls 1, haven't they? As you make your way upward, the inclusion of the Silver Knights and the makeshift pillar as a bridge may lead to this area starting to seem kind of familiar. Yeah, these telephone poles are not to be trifled with, but thankfully it's nowhere near as difficult as the Dark Souls 1 counterpart of it. However, it is still something you have to deal with, and you are still getting hit like a truck whenever they do hit you. Well, this wall sure looks suspicious. So, heading through the not-so-secret wall, you will find a very familiar hallway that has some very familiar armor, and at the end you will see an altar that no longer has Sunlight Blade because that's not in this game. Instead, though, there's nothing really here outside of a treasure box containing the reversal ring, which is useless. Well, kind of. You see, if you're doing the Lord of Hollows route, this is where you will find Henri's body as the Hollow Wedding is held. However, I'm not doing that route, so the only thing here again is the useless treasure box. But just to show it off, this is what the Henri cutscene looks like. You know, this elevator sure does feel familiar. Alright, that's enough gawking. Get your butt back on the elevator and lower it back down. We've got ourselves an invisible bridge to cross.
Name thyself, stranger. I am Yorshka, captain of the Dark Moon Knights. What beckoned thee to such a place? Thou thinkst too. Very well. Captain to this knightless company I remain. I will grant thee purpose. Thou'st journeyed far. Hear my voice. If thou shalt swear by the covenant to become a shadow of Father Gwyn and Sister Guinevere, a blade that shall hunt the foes of our lords, then I place thee under the aegis and the power of the Dark Moon. Thou art now a blade of the Dark Moon, the only knight of our company. swear this oath and face thy solemn duty.
This is Yorshka, a half-dragon and a descendant of Gwyn, but most notably the leader of the Dark Moon Covenant in this game, which can also be seen as the Blue Sentinels if they were actually good at their job. She'll explain to us the plot of Dark Souls 1 for those that don't know, but that's about it for now. Now we can head back to Anor Londo. Unfortunately, it only took them until the end of time to actually lock the front door again, so we're going to need to go through the side entrance. There's also a summon sign here for Henri, but ignore it for now, we'll cover that later. I guess two major story things I can talk about. For one, the Silver Knights appear here just like they did in Dark Souls 1, although these ones don't fade away when you kill them, they just collapse on the ground, which leads me to wonder, are these Silver Knights real? I guess these ones are real, while the ones in Dark Souls 1 were kind of just illusions. Spoilers for that game, I guess. The other big thing of note is Yorshka is actually considered to be a child of Gwyn, though why she's part dragon, I don't know. Maybe she's adopted or something, who could say. Now, be ready for a bit of a sad sight. Remember the giant blacksmith from Dark Souls 1 that would make you your boss weapons? Well, unfortunately, sometime in between games, he passed away. You can get his coal though, so I'd say we should probably give that to Andre whenever we get back. Now, we could rush it straight to the boss fight, but I wanted to point out that it only took them until the end of time, but they finally fixed the broken window. Congratulations, at least somebody was doing their job. We'll also find one of those Deathblight spider monkeys from the Cathedral of the Deep that shows up here. However, this one can't be cheesed out with a hallway, so you gotta be a bit careful, but I recommend just getting to killing him. And honestly, for taking him out, you will get the Aldrich Ruby, which is a ring that restores HP upon dealing a critical strike. Not a bad power-up for things, but bosses don't get knocked down too often in this game, so it's more for exploring and a few bosses that you can parry and repost. Still, it is a pretty useful thing, and it kind of set the groundwork for what would be used in Elden Ring, for one of the best rings in that game.
My, the coal of that peaceable giant. Seems like ages passed. I imagine his passing was long ago. I miss the old bugger, I do. My thanks. I'll be sure this coal is put to good use. I'll be smithing weapons never afore seen by the likes of ye. It's but a small service to pay my humble respects.
Now, I will warn you, before killing this boss, kind of like in Bloodborne, Dark Souls 3 does undergo a major world change after killing the third Lord of Cinder. However, I don't believe it kills off any NPCs like the Blood Moon did. However, it will replace some enemies with harder variants of themselves. So, you know, if you want to do any side questing, now might be the time to do it, if you're worried about that. Anyways, who's ready for an easy boss fight? Well, too bad. Aldrich is difficult. Kinda. You see, Aldrich is a caster boss, so if you let things snowball out of control, his non-Euclidean ass can be very dangerous, but once you realize he always warps to the opposite end of the arena, you can pretty easily stay on top of him. Having basically no real melee, it's not as bad as you think given the whole fanservice-y nature of the area. Aldrich has moves more derived from Dark Souls 1 bosses, basically all of Gwendolyn's move pool, given the obvious reasons, as well as the Life Hunt Scythe from Priscilla, and some things from Gravelord Nito. I believe like the Gravelord Sword, even though it's being repurposed as like a blade sort of thing. Whether he ate them or obtained their abilities through other means, I'm not 100% sure, but either way, this guy's a monster, and you kind of need to put him down, even if he is ultimately just kind of a puppet of the Pontiff. And once again, I will warn you, slaying the third Lord of Cinder, you will instantly be warped away once this fight is over. That's kind of why I recommend doing Aldrich's third and doing Yorm's second if you want to do Sigurd's questline.
Please save his soul. Prince Lothric is in your hands. Please save his soul. Tell him what he must be, a law.
Hopefully you weren't too tuckered out after your third Lord of Cinder fight, because you're going to be thrust into another boss fight just about right of way, and as you can see by my souls, I died to it. Thankfully, the Vort bonfire is right next to this battle, so the run back is almost non-existent. Anyways, this is the Dancer of the Boreal Valley, and with the title Dancer, that would suggest she has a very flowy moveset loving to twirl around the arena, and that suggestion would be correct. I use this Honestly, I used to find this boss fight impossible, but nowadays it's honestly not too bad at all. However, it is a bit odd that she's the last of Pontiff's forces, and we're fighting her after killing both Pontiff and Aldrich. Maybe that's a holdover from when Pontiff was going to be one of the last bosses, if not the final boss of the game. I'm not entirely sure. Though, another thing you could say is that she is a descendant of Gwyn, so who knows. You could fight her as early as your second boss if you wanted to murder Emma, but she's scaled for this point in the game right after your third Lord of Cinder, so fighting her early would be kind of a bad idea unless you're going for cheese strats or you're just that good. But killing her early would allow you to access the two optional areas past her and Lothric Castle early. However, the dungeon with the final Lord of Cinder would be locked off until killing the other three. Overall, the Dancer is a boss I've come to like a lot with her cool design, eerie music, and a
good atmosphere.
And once she goes down, the in-game is now open for you to explore. Have fun. Now at this point we are actually ready to go tackle the Upper Lothric Castle area and begin the in-game. However, I actually want to tackle the optional content because Dark Souls 3 has quite a bit of optional stuff to do in the end of it. The first up is if you take a left at the top of the ladder, you'll enter the Consumed King's Garden. I honestly have basically nothing to say about this place. It takes 20 seconds to run through, and while there is toxic areas on the ground, it is in a swamp, so it doesn't count. You've got some Pus of Men and Cathedral Knights from earlier levels, but it's kind of a nothing area that I've got very little to talk about. It's probably the smallest level in the game, even less to it than Cemetery of Ash. And I mean, at the same time, there isn't even a bonfire here, so I don't know. Let's just skip to the boss fight.
ignorant slaves. Finally taken notice, have you? Of the power of my beloved Ocelot, child of dragons. Well, I will not give him up, for he is all that I have.
Ooh boy, Osiros, my favorite boss in the game. You see, if you've actually seen my Dark Souls 3 boss ranking, you'd know that was a joke. This is probably my least favorite boss fight in the game. He's not overly difficult, I beat him first try in fact, but he's probably the most RNG heavy boss in the game, making him a not very fun time. The idea is that he has two drastically different phases, with phase 1 being more of a passive mage, trying to keep you away as he cradles what he thinks is his child, but he ended up going phase 2 extremely early on me, and that's where he turns into his savage dragon self, with a pretty awesome voice line. Osiris was a man once, the king of Lothric, and chose to transform himself into a dragon in an attempt to become an everlasting dragon of old. All credit due, he did a lot better than any other NPC that we've seen attempt it, but this second phase isn't fun. It's a bunch of janky attacks where he'll clip into parts of the arena, all with the most questionable hitboxes in the game, making you think you're playing Dark Souls 2. And that crack addict charge of his with no wind-up makes me very annoyed due to how much damage it has. I still think it's the worst attack in the game. It's unfortunate because his music is solid, and the idea of a smaller and scrappier dragon is awesome, but sadly it didn't pay off here, and FromSoft never really attempted it again. At least Black Myth, Wukong, and Ys 8 got the idea right, so there's that, but I don't really have much else to say about this fight, but I will mention there is cut audio in the game, where you can hear Osiris either violently smashing or devouring his baby, and from that point onward you no longer hear the crying. Very upsetting, and while I think it would definitely fit the world of Dark Souls 3, I fully understand why they removed it from the game. The death of a young child is a very sensitive topic, and I don't really want to tackle that in my Unga Bunga Souls game where I'm a brick shithouse named Jackass with a chin the size of Rhode Island. Now, while you could have probably had a Draconified King of a Fallen Nation act as your optional super boss and called it there, this game isn't done, as there's a door behind him, meaning we have more to explore, and this fight is actually required for the ending I will be going for with this playthrough. You're going to head down a hallway and see a bunch of these lizard dragon corpses, and one that's not so dead. Honestly, this serpent dude kind of reminds me of the Pilgrims, but just I guess a bit more serpent-like. Maybe it's their true form. I'm not entirely sure on that, to be honest. The big thing you'll see is a body meditating with the Path of the Dragon emote. We're gonna need this. However, don't ponder too much now, because, well, you're also going to find behind it is a treasure chest. And what's inside that treasure chest? Well, nothing major, it's really just a Titanite scale. But hey, I mean, it's still something you can use to upgrade boss weapons, and we can also point and laugh at that guy that got murked by the serpent. But behind it, it's an invisible wall behind a treasure chest, guys. It's just like Dark Souls! It's just like Dark Souls! I don't think I need to tell you what the Untinted Graves is inspired by. The first half is practically a 1-to-1 replica of the Cemetery of Ash, just now with some stat boosted enemies and a few extra enemy placements thrown in. But this probably also tells you who the next boss is going to be, so let's just skip to him because that's where all the good stuff is. One of my favorite video game tropes that some people may or may not like: the first boss, but stronger. Champion Gundyr is like Udex on crack, or I guess more accurately, what he was truly capable of in his prime, and the answer is a pretty tough foe. I love this boss, and I'm a sucker for getting to rematch the first boss of a game and see what they're truly capable of when the game puts effort into it. Like the Gundyr of old, you can in fact parry his glaive attacks, but he has other physical attacks that cannot be parried, so be careful. And unlike Gundyr of old, his phase 2 doesn't go pus mode. Instead, he chooses to fight you as a man, and he'll be using his full body and you can't parry things like the shoulder check or roundhouse kick. I've tried. I think this fight works great thematically at showing just how far the player has come from barely beating a husk of Gundyr to now standing toe-to-toe with the man, the myth, the legend himself, and it really brings home how something isn't right here, because if Gundyr is here, then what about Firelink Shrine? But we'll have to take the boss down if we want to find out, so I'd say your safest moments are after his jumping attacks or whenever you parry him, but it's easier said than done when he can juggle you like a fighting game character. The last big thing of note is Gundyr's boss theme. It's actually one of only 2 songs in the game, the other being the Deacon of the Deep, to not be composed by Yuka Kitamura or Motoi Sakuraba. Instead, the composer is credited as Tsukasa Saito, and I think they do a fantastic job with the one song in the game they have. Now, this next part is going to be wrapping up some loose ends, as well as seeing what's beyond Gundyr, and the answer may surprise you, as it's Black Knights that will rock your shit, so be careful. Oh, also this is where you get the Black Knight Halberd, so yeah, that weapon has got a perfect attendance record in the trilogy. Now, if we go to where Firelink Shrine is, normally you'll find Firelink Shrine, quiet and empty aside from an old handmaid. She's friendly enough and will sell you things, but the real important stuff here are the items. First up is the coiled sword that can be used as infinite homeward bones, so feel free to sell all of them if you need the money, or I guess souls. Second is, if you go to where Yol's body is, you can find hollow ashes. See, when a merchant dies from one means or another, they leave behind their ashes that you can give to the handmaid to get put into her inventory and buy those items still. Yol didn't leave behind any ashes when he died despite teaching sorcery, so here you are. If Soul Arrow is something you need, I guess it works, but to be honest, sorcery kinda sucks outside of Dark Souls 2, at least in the trilogy. It's pretty awesome in Elden Ring, but then again, all magic types are in that game. The last and most important thing, though, is in the back left corner of Firelink Shrine, go to where Irina is normally located. You will find the Eyes of the Firekeeper. This is extremely important and is necessary to reach another ending, my personal favorite of Dark Souls 3's endings. Now, it's time to head back to Firelink Shrine, as we've got a questline to wrap up. Now, if you go back to Firelink proper, and you'll see the handmaid is selling a special budding green blossom for a mere 10 souls with a note attached. It's a note that Cirrus left saying goodbye to her grandmother, which sadly is not the handmaid. You see, Cirrus has her grandmother buried right outside Firelink Shrine, and the handmaid went and took the flowers from it, because she's a jackass. This would be like visiting your best friend, or I guess your best friend visiting their grandmother's grave, leaving flowers only for the, shall we say, shifty old person to go and steal the flowers and demand you pay her to get them back. What a bitch. Anyways, you'll want to head over to the Pit of Hollows and get to fighting the boss, because as much as it would be funny to kill the handmaid, she'll just respawn and jack up the prices. Now, as for the boss fight itself, as you may have pieced together, Cirrus is the granddaughter of Hodrick, the once proud holy knight, now turned a shell of his former self, as a savage hollow that rose up after seemingly being crushed to death by the curse-rotted Greatwood. We need to lay him to rest, but he is a tough opponent if you fight him fairly. So, don't fight him fairly, just cheese him out like a bastard. If you head back to Firelink, you can now speak with Cirrus and she will ask to become your knight. If you say no, she'll ask you to reconsider, but once enough time passes, she'll leave and you can be found as a hollow down in the pit. If you say yes, she'll join you as a summonal NPC for a fair number of the game's remaining bosses.
Oh, there you are. I'm afraid I've involved you in my affairs, over a little promise at that. My sincerest thanks for your assistance. At last, my grandfather will rest in peace, and I can die. But there is one last, may I take a vow? To serve you as a knight. Oh, I am most grateful. I, Cirrus, do hereby serve as your faithful knight. Wherever, whenever I am needed. My loyalty shall never waver. Blessing of the moon upon your journey.
Now, give the Firekeeper the eyes and listen carefully.
Speak thine heart's desire. Ashen One, are these eyes? How gracious of thee, Ashen One. The very things we Firekeepers have been missing. Ashen One, my thanks for the eyes thou'st given. But Firekeepers are not meant to have eyes. It is forbidden. These will reveal through a sliver of light frightful images of betrayal, a world without fire. Ashen One, is this truly thy wish? Of course. I serve thee, and will do as thou bidst. This will be our private affair. No one else may know of this. Stay thy path. Find lords to link the fire, and I will blindly tend to the flame until the day of thy grand betrayal.
The hub world theme will permanently change for the remainder of the playthrough. This does not void out your options for the other endings, however, it will provide you a choice once you slay the final boss of the game. This isn't like the Lord of Hollows ending, which straight up locks you out of the regular ending of the game though, so that's good. Remember that dragon statue in the Earthel dungeon? Remember that gesture we unlocked after Osiros? Yeah, put 2 and 2 together and get moving. We're going to another optional area. Welcome to the Archdragon Peak, the secret level of Dark Souls 3, and as far as I remember, the first time From Software hid an area and secret boss behind a random gesture you had to learn in another part of the world. They'd then go on to do it again. You'll notice that the lizard man we encountered was not a weird one-off, but instead was a common enemy of Archdragon Peak, frequently dropping things like large titanite upon death, and even sometimes dropping dropping titanite chunks. If you need to upgrade any more weapons, this is probably the best place to do it. Now, to progress the level proper, we're going to need to open the gate, but thankfully the lever is right next to it, so no hunting required here, though I would recommend picking up the bonfire that's right behind you first. After you pass through the gate, be prepared to get attacked by a boss immediately. Thankfully, I don't think you have to worry about it too much in terms of difficulty. The Ancient Wyvern takes basically no damage from any attacks, so a straight up fight is not in the cards. So yeah, the idea here is that we're going to be running across the Archdragon Peak, fighting off enemies while being assaulted by a giant wyvern. In concept, I actually think this is an alright boss fight, however in practice it falls flat for a few reasons. As this is Dark Souls 3, the optimal strategy is really just run past everything. Additionally, the boss doesn't do a lot to actually attack you. I think if it was more aggressive and the arena had fewer enemies, it would have worked out better. Or better yet, make this one of the first bosses the player faces. Having this as your second or third boss would allow it to feel like a triumph over a large foe, and work as a good teaching tool for new players about the value of using verticality to your advantage. This should not be the second or third to last boss most players will face in their base game. Or another thing would be just have the majority of the Archdragon Peak be dealing with the Ancient Wyvern. You know, like have shortcuts you open up and different things. You may be doing boss runs again and again. It could be interesting. I don't know. There's a lot of ways I feel like this boss could have been better, but unfortunately it just kind of ends up falling flat because you're just going to one-shot it with a plunging attack. Now that the Wyvern is dead, it's time to go through the Archdragon Peak for real, though to be perfectly honest, this area isn't as long as it may feel, it's just got some tough enemies in it. So if you know what you're doing, you can run all the way to Nameless King in about 120 seconds. One of the biggest things is going to be the Dragon Knights from the Dark Souls 2 DLC can get summoned in here, and they're basically like NPCs. They are some tough foes. I don't know how, and I don't know what I'm doing, but I managed to get invaded again in Dark Souls 3 in 2025. What the heck? One thing I'm not the biggest fan of about Archdragon Peak are the enemies, or one enemy in particular. You see, Dark Souls 1 had the Bone Wheels. Dark Souls 2 had the Icy Hedgehog things. Dark Souls 3 has these freaking fire-breathing rock lizards that are so annoying to deal with and love to stunlock you off a cliff. I hate these enemies. And just so you don't get bored, there's also a second Wyvern in the area, though thankfully not the Ancient Wyvern, instead it's the Archdragon Peak Wyvern. A verifiable jerk that's not at all fun to fight, but thankfully he is a very funny cheese tactic if you have a bow. I don't think the rewards are really worth it, but thankfully when it dies it stays out the way, and it still is a couple of upgrades, so that's always good. Now, you could run up the stairs and risk getting knocked off by the lizards, but I recommend just running up the side of the mountain, because for some reason the slopes let you do that, and you can skip the rock lizards. Be mindful of the sorceress as she'll summon one of those knights from the end of the Dark Souls 2 DLC. I just say run past everything here, because you're about to get to the bonfire and the bell, ring the bell, and you'll be done. Now, once you've rung the bell, you can actually go fight the base game super boss right away. However, there is a little bit more to explore if you go past the bonfire, because running past it gives us two options, and heading left up the peak and past the clown car of enemies will allow us to obtain a Twinkling Dragon Torso Stone, giving us a stronger dragon transformation than the regular dragon stones provided, and it's part of a quest line that I don't care too much about, but hey, if you want a dragon transformation, you can. Though, it's also Dark Souls 3, so the dragon transformation looks kinda hideous. However, if you choose to hang right and go up the ladder, you'll instead find a dead wyvern with a titanite slab for you, and you'll find the legendary one and only Howl the Rock. Time has not been kind to the Rock. With the bell rung and the ability to walk on storm clouds, we head inside, and descending from the sky riding on a dragon, we have a fight against the King of the Storm, a far more bird-like dragon than many we've encountered. I guess it's technically a wyvern and not a proper dragon given the lack of arms, but it still is a strong foe. However, as cool as the design and presentation of this fight is, it loses some points for the camera being kind of a mess. Thankfully, his health isn't that crazy and he takes additional damage on the head, and an easy stagger means it's not too long until this Storm Drake will go down. The firstborn and mightiest son of Gwyn, the Lord of Cinder, the man erased from history for siding with the dragons in the great war between dragons and gods, all images of him removed from the glorious cathedrals of Anor Londo, all mentions of his name removed from history. Now he is simply a king without a name, ready to kill you. And damn if he isn't going to try his best. And the Nameless King is a mighty foe, and on a first-time playthrough might just be the hardest boss in the base game. I don't think he'll maintain his difficulty as well as another boss that we've yet to encounter, but that's not to say he's easy. He's certainly a strong enough foe that's worthy of the title of Super Boss, but he is very learnable and all his attacks have delays that will throw off a new player, but become punish windows for experienced players, especially after playing games like Sekiro and Elden Ring where we had to adapt. That being said, despite the delays, I'd still say this fight moves at quite the intense pace because there's basically no downtime, as Nameless is almost always preparing an attack of some kind, or finishing an attack of some kind. If you want to deal damage with him, you have to go for it while he's attacking you or immediately after the dodge. Don't expect him to just idle and watch you. But with enough persistence, and maybe getting a lucky stagger, the almighty firstborn will eventually fall, and you'll have slain the strongest of Gwyn's children.
Wait, you've the same scent as that woman. Then you must be an Ashen One. You must be. Oh, you don't know how long I've searched. Oh, don't mind me. Didn't mean to fall apart. Now, Ashen One, I have a kindness to ask of you. My lady lives in the cold land of Ariandel. I need you to show her flame. A proper flame that will burn the rot away. If you truly are ash, then it must be fire that you seek. Ah, thank you. They of ash never fail. Just a moment, then. The painting of Ariandel. Well, rotted scrap of it, that is. Go on. Take it. Touch it. The ashes were too.
Have you just arrived? How very unusual. Just how long has it been? Rejoice, my new friend, for this is a true haven of the Lord, the cold and gentle painted world of Ariandel. Quick, go along. A sweetly rotting bed to lie upon.
Well, that was weird. Anyways, welcome to Ashes of Ariandel, the first DLC expansion of Dark Souls 3, and generally considered the less fun of the two. This wintry wonderland of sorts is less than welcoming to newcomers that can be best divided into two major areas, snow areas and fleshy rot areas, about 6 years before Scarlet Rot became a thing. Be careful when exploring though, you might alert the wolves of the region, and wolves are kinda like the dogs from the base game, but instead of being teleporty asshats, they're actually kinda cool, and I like them well enough. Instead of bum rushing you, they like to surround you as a pack and attack you one or two at a time, making for an interesting foe that just whatever the heck dogs were doing. You know, wolves are a lot better in this game. Future Christian here. Guess who ended up losing all of the audio for pretty much the last 27 minutes of this 30-minute segment? Yeah, I had to do this all over again, so we're basically just going to a bridge here. Step 1, don't die to gravity. When you get to the bottom, it is indeed time for crap, so maybe consider grabbing the bonfire down here at the frozen lake first. What a thrill. Get yourself a Titanite slab here at the top. Very nice. Now, at the bottom of the frozen lake, in this beautiful field of flowers and snow, we come across our first boss of the DLC. An NPC that couldn't even have the decency to put on some pants for the boss fight. Just what is he doing with these wolves? Anyways, yeah, this guy really is just a regular NPC with a unique weapon known as the Valor Heart. The Valor Heart's actually a pretty cool weapon, but it's not going to affect this fight too much. And he doesn't even have a unique armor set. He's just wearing the chain armor and a Dark Wraith hood. It's pretty lazy. Just stun lock him like every other NPC. Kill him and feel uncomfortable about the fact that this man was chilling out with wolves in a field of snow with no pants on. Thankfully, after beating him up a bunch, the Great Wolf is here to save us by giving us an actual boss fight, and you could have encountered the Great Wolf earlier in the DLC, and if you beat him there he would show up with somewhat reduced HP, but overall it's still mostly the same fight. And this might be a hot take, but I actually enjoy this boss fight a lot. I think he does a good job keeping the player on their toes, and the way he kicks up snow and you'll be able to see an attack preparing just as it begins to clear makes for a really memorable visual, and can lead to this fight being actually a pretty good challenge. It's not a perfect fight by any means, but it's one that I think deserves a bit more love than it gets, as a lot of people generally consider this the worst boss in the game just because of the lazy NPC fight, and while that NPC is terrible, I don't think it really hurts the fight, really. It's just kind of a weird, awkward phase 1. Plus, I think the music here is one of the best tracks in the game that does not get nearly enough love. Overall, I think this fight would have been better if either the Grave Tender had a unique armor set or just wasn't there in the first place. But for winning, you'll get yourself the Valor Heart, which is a neat enough weapon, but you'll also be rewarded with the Champion's Bones, allowing you access to this game's PvP arenas. Keep in mind I'm recording this in 2025, so really we just got access to the Valor Heart and nothing else of value. Alright, now to the village portion. Everything here you're gonna see is red and rotten. Was this Elden Ring foreshadowing, or did they just kind of think of that after the fact of, hey, you know, we could kind of use this for the future and make it actually more of a plot point? The most notable thing here are these witch doctor asshats that are hyper aggressive and love to stun lock the crap out of you, but thankfully they stagger to a light breeze, which is pretty indicative of the main boss of the DLC, so I guess this is technically preparing you for that fight. Still, I don't really like fighting these guys that much.
There is nothing forlorn about you. that you seek. Surely you've seen the rot that afflicts our world, but that which fooled the good father and buried the pain after we had all made up our minds too. So, please, grant us one wish. Make the tales true and burn this world away. My lady must see. I've seen your kind, time and time again. Every fleeing man must be caught. Every secret must be unearthed. Such is the conceit of the self-proclaimed seeker of truth. But in the end, you have to stand for the agony that you bring on yourself.
Oh no, Sir Wilhelm was evil? Who would have guessed? Kill the shit out of him and move on. You're gonna need to kill him though, because you need to get his key in order to progress, and be warned, he actually does have Tranquil Walk of Peace, which is kind of diabolical on an NPC opponent. If this was fleshed out to be a bit more of a fight and not just a random NPC battle, he might have actually been tough. Go up the stairs and say hello to the only consequential NPC in this entire expansion.
I believe I feel the scent of ash upon thee. Thou art the one of whom Uncle Gale spoke, the one who showed me flame. 'Tis good. When this is done, may I return. The door is open thanks to thee. 'Tis good. I'll head off to paint. I promise them.
From here, it's basically just running through the snowfields, trying not to get murdered by Millwood Knights, wolves, and whatever else until you reach the area where everything is rotten. So, yeah, just run through it. It's not going to take more than about 5 minutes. Once your ass gets down to the bottom, make sure you find the correct pillar that has a chain on it and pull the lever, and get ready to be mobbed by flies after the cutscene ends.
As ashes will be, ever seeking fire.
Seriously, look at this bullshit. Look at this. Okay, so major annoyances with getting this whole segment thrown together and having to redo it all aside, I have to be honest, I don't like this DLC. It feels like the main point of this expansion was to add the multiplayer, and otherwise it's your obligatory snow level. I think the snowy parts are fine and pretty fun, but the areas where the rot overtakes everything I'm less fond of because, while it visually is striking, the enemies are not enjoyable to deal with, and it's not a sizable DLC either. Granted, I truncated the crap out of this segment for the video, but we're about to fight the final boss of the DLC, and my total playtime through it was 48 minutes. To some people, this final boss more than makes up for it, but for me, well, if you've seen my boss ranking, you know my opinions on the fight.
Flickering once again. Not enough blood yet, shed. My flail. Bring me my flail. Reader, what stops thine tears? Please, my flail. bring Frida to me, please? Canst thou not see the flame flickering once again? Soon will it surge. I can see it, feel it.
Fret not, Father. We have no need of thy flail. 'Tis only the flame quivering at misguided ash. Please avert thine eyes. I will snuff out these ashes for good.
Bring me my flail, Frida. Yeah, instead of getting to fight the giant dude, we're just fighting the lady with the scythe. Honestly, there's not too much to her. She's aggressive, but she staggers to everything, and her most unique attack is her ability to go invisible, where you have to follow her trails in the snow to find her. Now, this is a little bit interesting because if it goes to the left, that means that she jumped to the right. If it goes to the right, that means she jumped left. If it just goes straight up, that means that she's jumped behind you. It is a cool attack, and I do like that, but I don't really have much to say about Phase 1 other than that attack because it's just a warm-up. Now, at this point, Father BDSM gets a little bit pissed off with us and is going to try to murder us himself. Yeah, I guess it is thankfully that there is more to the fight, but I don't think it's getting much better now that you have to deal with him slinging around his fresh pot of Estus soup, and Freed is there again because she came back to life immediately to help him. They do share a health bar, which is nice, but the fight can still be an ordeal because Frida will often try to heal the not-so-good father. And another unfortunate problem of this fight is the visual clusterfuck of not being able to see what Sister Fried is doing too well in this phase, which can lead to you taking hits from attacks you may not notice thanks to Shrek trying to beat you to death with his bowl of freshly cooked grits. And there's no picking targets for this phase. You're either going after Father Ariandel or you're just doing it wrong. So get ready to kill him and, yeah, murder the shit out of him. Also, Gale will show up with a steel chair to help you. That's pretty cool, at least. Did you think we were done yet after 2 health bars? Well, guess what? No, we're not. Ariandel's speech is not only unskippable, it also locks you out of your menu, so if you need to heal between phases, hope you have your ember toggled on your hotbar. Black Flame Frida is basically phase 1 on crack, with her having a second scythe as well to attack you some more, though I don't think the Black Flame resets your frostbite like regular fire does in phase 2. Anyways, she's hyper aggressive to the point of feeling overwhelming, but I wouldn't call her fun for 2 reasons. One would be the invincibility. She could do, like, okay, in phase 1 she did it as a specific attack, but now she just does it sometimes to lose you and break your luck. 2, she still staggers to everything like an NPC, and because of how this fight is structured, having to do all 3 phases in one go, and them all feeling relatively different, I feel like I'm not really learning or improving with this fight, as honestly, you don't need to learn it. What you need to learn is learn how to stun lock her. I get why people like this boss. It can be challenging and it can be a thrilling battle, however, I don't enjoy it. And I don't really like this DLC either. The level design is kind of mixed for me. It only has 2 bosses. One of them I think is alright, and the other one I just don't enjoy that much. To top it all off, my total playtime of this DLC was 1 hour and 59 seconds. That's including deaths. It's not a long DLC at all, and I haven't played through it since 2018. It's been 7 years since I touched it, and I was still able to get it all done in just over an hour. I used to think Broom Tower was the worst of From Software's DLCs, but upon replaying the Dark Souls trilogy and their DLCs, I can safely say this is the worst one in my eyes. Not dreadful by any means, but not as fun as the others, and nowhere near as good as Sunken King, Shadow of the Erdtree, Old Hunters, and yes, the other Dark Souls 3 DLC. Now, with that done, Frida will die, and that's time for enough stalling. Let's get back to the base game and actually continue the story. Assuming the audio actually kept. Good lord, please tell me that it actually kept this time. Once you think you're ready, it's time for the endgame, so head up the ladder and get ready for Lothric Castle, where you're going to be seeing a lot of enemies that are basically the same as their High Wall of Lothric counterparts, which makes sense given the very close proximity. And yeah, a lot of the enemies we encounter here are very similar to the early game, now tweaked and powered up for in-game, ranging from your Hollow Soldiers, your Lothric Knights, and the big fat Wing Knight foes that you've encountered throughout the game, and there's a couple different set pieces here to note. One such set piece is the 2 wyverns that begin to breathe fire on you at such absurd intervals that there's no way to really get past them. Yeah, these guys don't quite move right, but they're also not supposed to. What you can do is you can sneak around them and be all careful, but the more effective method is honestly just to fire arrows at them until they go down, because they will not respawn even after you reload the bonfire, because the hazards are disabled. Of course, all you did there was solve a very small part of the problem, so yeah, what's causing these wyverns to freak out so much and act all immobile and puppeteer-like? Well, we're gonna have to go down below to find out. The answer to that question is none other than these weird specialized pus of men attached to the wyverns' corpses. You see, these things were puppeteering around their bodies. These guys can't actually move, but they have the unique attack where they can spew it all around the floor, making them very annoying to deal with. So I recommend you just fire on them with arrows from a distance, or magic or something. As you've probably learned at this point, fighting your enemies fairly is not the way to go in the world of Dark Souls 3. Use every advantage you have at your disposal in order to beat them. Something else interesting we'll find here is there's a mimic. Like, we've seen many mimics throughout Dark Souls 3, but this one's special. It doesn't walk on its 2 legs like the regular mimics, instead it flips over and moves around like the Dark Souls 2 mimics. These guys are a lot tougher and more awkward to fight than their DS1 counterparts because they're a lot less predictable. That being said, they're thankfully nowhere near as janky as the Dark Souls 2 counterparts. There's also one that appears in the Irithyll dungeon, but that's the Irithyll dungeon. I'm not really wanting to deal with anything in that place. I just throw a Lloyd's Talisman on and I take the goodies and keep moving. I do wish there was more for me to talk about in this location, as I do like it a good bit, but at the same time, it's kind of just an amped up version of what we saw at the start of the game in the High Wall of Lothric, and I'm out of new mechanics to cover. So yeah, I mean, the level is a challenge. It's meant to show how bad things have gotten, and how serious it is with the dark sun in the sky, and also show how far you've come as a player, as now you're conquering an area that you were barely scraping by to survive early on in the game. Though, I don't really have any complaints here. I think it's a good in-game level, and I do enjoy it quite a bit. I just don't have as much to say about it as some of the earlier levels, or the level that follows it. Now, what I do have a bit more to say about is the next boss fight. I think this upcoming boss is, in my opinion, the most underrated fight in the entire game. The Dragon Slayer armor has a design reminiscent of Ornstein, a recurring character in this trilogy, though in this case it's less of a showdown with a great hero and more these moth creatures making a mockery of his memory, as the armor is completely empty and the boss has higher defenses than the average boss does to make up for his somewhat low HP, although admittedly 4000 isn't really low in Dark Souls 3, it's more like a baseline. Because there's basically no vitals here, so status effects aren't gonna work. The moths will also join in on the fight by firing down projectiles, but honestly this always felt more like a visual effect than an actual hazard because the projectiles never really did enough to matter. I don't think I've ever been killed by one, and when they do hit you, it's chip damage at the worst. Though, they could totally suck in a no damage run, and I get if you're doing one of those, I would absolutely hate this fight. But I'm not gonna do that because I don't hate myself, so I do love this boss. I would also say don't be fooled by the straightforward appearance of this fight, as the Dragon Slayer armor is a crafty one, as he's the only opponent in the game, and as far as I know in the entire trilogy, that will make use of a fake out stagger where it looks like he's fallen down, but really he's baiting you in for a counterattack. I love this fight because while it may not move at a breakneck pace, it's constantly in motion with very little downtime despite the turtle appearance of the foe. He's also one of the bosses in the game I'd consider surprisingly challenging because while he's by no means a world ender, he's a boss that's never really gotten easier for me over time. That being said, I did manage to beat him first try, so there is that. And I guess the last thing to talk about would be the music. It's widely regarded as Phase 1 is one of the best songs in the entire game, and Phase 2 is regarded as not as good, though honestly I like the Phase 2 theme. I like how the string section sounds like it's encouraging the player to put an end to this monster. Now, after defeating the Dragon Slayer armor, you are gifted the most pointless bonfire in the entire game. And why is it pointless, you may ask? Well, if you run up to the top, you're gonna see there's another bonfire right here at the Grand Archives. Anyways, reaching this next bonfire, you'll find a few things. An elevator, Goddard's twin swords, and the Grand Archives key to open the door right in front of you. Now, you may wonder why bother with putting a key right in front of the door, but this is programmed to only spawn in if you've killed the other 3 Lords of Cinder, so if you were naughty and murdered Emma, turn your ass around. And as you enter the Grand Archives, be prepared to be greeted by a familiar face, actually. Yeah, here's the weird thing about Grand Archives, the Crystal Sage shows up here. And yes, this is a second Crystal Sage that is going to teleport throughout the Grand Archives of the dungeon and will harass you as a hazard. Not too dissimilar to the Ancient Wyvern, but honestly much better implemented. And you want to know the craziest thing? I got invaded again in 2025. Now, after a couple bouts of abbreviating the areas, you might be surprised to hear there's actually a few things to say about Grand Archives because we have a proper gimmick here in this place, and that is the wax pools. You can dip your head into these in order to make yourself look goofy, however, they do also have a benefit of making you immune to the curses in this area because the library is filled with books that will open up and have terrifying hands from Majora's Mask come out of the books. Not only do they curse you, but they also deal chip damage and can stun you, so be careful when exploring this place and restock on wax regularly if you can, because after the first area, just assume that any books you see are out to murder you. And other big thing of note is there's a ton of good upgrade materials here, but be careful because just like the Cathedral of the Deep, there is only a single bonfire and it's at the start. It's all about the shortcuts here. And yes, the Crystal Sage isn't... The Crystal Sage is in fact still going to be harassing you throughout this level. Thankfully though, the Crystal Sage is counted as a mini-boss, so when you do finally kill him, he has the decency to stay permanently dead. And you'll also get a special item out of beating him, the Crystal Scroll. More sorcery for you if you care about that stuff. I gotta hand it to you, game, these archives really seem like a handful. Yeah, I deserve that damage. That being said, there's more to the archives than just the library, as you'll have to head outside and run along the rooftops of Lothric Castle. Try not to die, because there's no bonfires in this dungeon, it's all shortcuts, and gargoyles from Profane Capital are back, but this time they have heads, and they're a lot tougher. Also, if you did have Grey Rat still alive, and you sent him out a third time, this is where you would find his corpse. He's programmed to die here when you send him out on the final adventure. The game is also nice and just gives you the last undead bone shard basically for free here on the main path. You're also going to want to kick down this ladder because again, no bonfire. I'm not 100% sure about overall reception, but I would honestly say that the Lothric area as a whole, between the High Wall, the castle, and the Grand Archives, it's probably my favorite of the base game areas and maybe my favorite level in the game entirely. Oh yeah, there's also this point near the end of the dungeon where you'll see 3 NPCs, kind of meant to be reminiscent of the Nightmare Gank trio from Bloodborne, but you can just run past them and keep running to the elevator because you'll find yourself back to the bonfire, letting you know the pain, the nightmares are pretty much over. Also, hey, look, players putting down their summoning signs in 2025, that's weird. And if you're willing to go a little bit out of your way at the bonfire, instead of taking the main path, you will come across a mini-boss fight against 3 Lothric Angels, I guess? These are the final evolutions of the Winged Knights, and they are some tough foes, able to fly and have long combos, on top of being the only foes in the game that I know of that can dodge roll, which is hilarious, but also a bit terrifying. Or at least the only foes that are not, like, NPCs or Abyss Watchers, that sort of stuff. But you do really want to take them out, if you can. If you can beat all 3 angels in a single go, you will be rewarded with one of the game's few Titanite slabs, or at the very least one of the few that was actually obtainable during the main game before all the DLCs came out, because once Ashes of Ariandel came out, they were a lot easier to get, but remember, Dark Souls 3 Titanite slabs were very limited on launch. But once you've steeled yourself, get ready, pop yourself a green herb of some sort to boost your stamina, because it's time for the bridge. This place is a collection of Lothric's toughest enemies, pretty much all combined here into one, in one last set of opponents strictly ready to kill you. That being said, this is Dark Souls 3, so you really just want to run past everything and hang right as you get to the end, because there's another bonfire and pretty much the only real use out of the Dragon Slayer armor bonfire for saving you a bit of time. Also, interesting thing, I think one of them is a mini-boss because they'll pretty often fall to their death, giving you some souls, embers, and Titanite chunks, which is kinda cool. Oh, and of course, I would be remiss if I did not mention that the longest elevator in Dark Souls 3 is a double elevator. If you ride it all the way to the bottom, you will be rewarded with the one free Titanite slab in the game. It's the only one that doesn't require a quest line or a mini-boss fight to unlock, so it's pretty good, at least without DLC. With the DLC, you know, you just climb a ladder. Anyways, this is also kind of your shortcut back to the main boss, so I recommend picking it up, it can be helpful. Now, let's go face that last Lord of Cinder.
Oh dear. Another dogged contender. Welcome, unkindled one, purloiner of cinders. Mind you, the mantle of Lord interests me none. The fire-linking curse, the legacy of lords, let it all fade into nothing. You've done quite enough. Now have your rest.
Our foe is the mighty first prince of the kingdom of Lothric, Prince Lorien. He's a physical brute, but due to his lack of lower bodily functions, he can't move around too well, but not to worry, he's being assisted by the younger prince, Lothric, teleporting him around. Also, just naming your second child after the kingdom definitely sounds like someone was playing favorites and asking for a usurper to rise to power, but that's neither here nor there. The interesting thing about Lorien is you can actually parry him. Like, I'm not kidding, you can. I don't think most people actually know this because you can't repost him. He'll get stunned for a second, but it won't do anything in the long run, and the parry window is pretty tight.
Dear brother, I'm on my way. My brother, unyielding sword of Lothric's prince. Rise if you would, for that is our curse.
Lorien may have gone down, but with the power of a Lord Ascender, he's getting right back up, and now we've got two targets. Lorien, the big body, and Lothric, the actual target, firing off magic projectiles. This is a demanding boss fight that will require a lot out of the player, but thankfully it's surprisingly readable, and Lorien can actually be parried. Again, it's a little useful thing here because it'll give you a free extra window to punish the enemy. Though you can't really repost him, but at the same time, he's one of the only bosses to have a stagger meter in the base game, like the Elden Ring foes, meaning after enough punishment you can get a critical strike off on him to deal some massive damage. Now if you kill Lorien, Lothric will take the time to revive him, giving you a chance to attack, but Lorien will come back with less health each time he goes down, so you're still making progress even if you miss taking out Prince Backpack. And the last thing I have to say is the soundtrack in this fight is amazing, sounding like what you'd expect to hear for an in-game boss, and as the second to last required boss of this whole game, it more than delivers. Now, with all the lords slain, we can head off to the endgame. However, outside of DLC, I do want to wrap up a couple things while Lilith is still alive, so we have two major places to go. Heading into Farron Keep in the Abyss Watchers Arena, we'll see where Hawkwood went after he pieced out of the hub world, and now we fight for the pieces of the Twinkling Dragonstone. If he kills you, he will steal it from you. However, at the same time, he is just an NPC, so we all know how this song and dance is gonna go. More importantly, it's time to finally wrap up Henri's questline, so head back to Anor Londo and you'll find a summoning sign, and if you answer it, you will be summoned to her world as a phantom to help her out. And as it turns out, when you get there, Aldrich isn't quite dead yet. So we need to fix that, and the fact that you get to just absolutely clown on Aldrich with an in-game build is one of the most cathartic feelings in this game. If you haven't done Henri's questline this way, I actually recommend doing it. It's a lot of fun. It's not hard, and this fight is pretty easy. Even with the arrow rain, it's not going to be too tough. Overall, I think his stats are basically the exact same, but it is kind of neat getting to actually fight Aldrich a second time on a single playthrough and not have to just go to New Game Plus, so that's pretty enjoyable. Not too much else for me to really say on this fight, but it's, again, very cathartic getting to clown on a mid-game boss with an in-game build.
I owe this to you. Thank you, truly. Horace, we've done it. We really have.
Now, to fully finish up this questline, you actually want to head back and talk to Ludlith, as he'll give you a bit more dialogue to wrap everything up, and you get her straight sword, a weapon made for meme builds due to it being able to scale with luck. It also used to be a speedrunning weapon, which is kinda cool.
Now, heed this little warning from this little lord. Seek not the girl. She knoweth her fate, what will become of her upon her duty's end. She would not wish thee follow her.
Alright, at this point we're more than able to go beat the game, but we still have one last DLC to tackle, and there's two ways to access it, either by going to the final area of the game and taking a bonfire there, or beating Ashes of Ariandel, but because I want to keep Ludlith alive as long as possible, we're going to be going to the DLC, or going through it via the DLC first.
Oh, your head's square on your shoulders, is it? I thought that clamoring tin can was the last. But here we go again. What is it you want from this old stone-amped hag? I've nothing for you, not a smithereen. Well, that came out of nowhere. You think an old stone-amped hag will be brimming with goodies? I've none of that, not a smithereen.
This area is the Dreg Heap, also the final area of the base game, but we're seeing it from a different angle because now we're down below getting to see the destroyed city. It'll make more sense when we get up to the actual final area of the main game. Now, heading through this place, you'll quickly learn two things. Gravity is a myth, and Gale has been through here, leaving us notes on where it's safe to go, and enemies here like these void monsters that will sometimes swarm you and sometimes go for the kamikaze. Don't bother fighting them. While they don't exactly infinitely respawn, there's so many of them that you're not gonna make it. But the real threat of the DLC are these true angels. These seemingly invincible foes will watch over the land, firing down beams of light upon you, making for some dangerous foes. Or they used to. You see, about a week after the launch of the Ring City DLC, the angels were nerfed heavily because they initially had such high attack density they were a firing squad with automatic machine guns. And they would murder you in half a second if you stuck your head out. I don't have footage of this because that nerf took place almost 8 years ago and I was in high school when that happened. Now, they're still kind of dangerous but nowhere near as bad, and we can even run past this one to get the Ring of Steel Protection +3 early, which gives a major cut to physical damage we receive and is much stronger than the base game variant as a somewhat questionable design choice. This DLC has quite a few of the best rings, having +3 variants you can get on a standard new game save file. Personally, I think it's fine. This is the final content the player will experience in this trilogy, but I do get the annoyance of beating the game twice for a +2 model only to get it beat out by a first time playthrough in the DLC. We'll also come across another friendly NPC. Yeah, there's actually 2 of them left in this DLC. Or I guess 3 technically.
Look at you. You've got your head screwed on correct. Fantastic. To meet a kindred spirit on this god's forsaken crag. Call me Lab. I can't remember my real name, so let's just go with that. I have a feeling we're going to make a fabulous team. Oh, you'll see. You'll see. Oh, in all honesty, there's something I should tell you. Oh no. Yes. I try to play it off, but I haven't a clue about my past, who I was, or what I lived for. Not even my own blessed name.
for the Purging Monument. Said to be in the Ringed City, where the pygmies who found the Dark Soul at the Dawn of Fire reside. All I can say is, those little stones aren't doing much to help me remember anymore. Well, that's the long and short of it. So if I completely forget who you are, don't be rough with me. Come on, what else can I say? I'm a bloody hollow, for heaven's sake.
One last poison swamp for the road, huh, Miyazaki? Well, at least until Elden Ring, which added like 6 more. Anyways, we'll once again be ducking and diving to avoid the wrath of an angel until we can reach those tree branches and finally learn how to kill these otherwise immortal foes. These fleshy monster things are the avatars, or the true bodies of the angels, and slaying them will permanently kill the angels that will otherwise just respawn again and again until death. It is pretty cool getting to take them out, and it's like you're clearing out a level hazard in that sort of way, except this level hazard gives you souls. I haven't mentioned it yet, but we're actually inside the Earthen Peak from Dark Souls 2, and our final NPC battle of the game, sort of, pits us against the desert sorceress herself, Zoe. She's a master level pyromancer, and she can end your life very quickly, so not an opponent to be trifled with. But still, she is an NPC, so the cheese method will work all the same, and because she's a desert sorceress, she's not exactly packing high level defenses, if we're being honest here. As I said before, welcome to the Dreadkeep, gravity is just a myth. After the bonfire, get ready for another long fall that should totally make your ankles hurt a little bit, but hey, after Nito, I'm not complaining when a boss drop does no damage. Now, get ready for the first boss of the Ring City DLC, and in my opinion, one of the best bosses. Say hello to the Demon in Pain and Demon from Below, one of, if not the best duo boss From Software has ever made, and a more than satisfying send-off to the demons of the Dark Souls trilogy. See, these two bosses have the same moveset, but instead of being a badly designed spam fest like Lud and Zalin, these guys will instead swap between an active mode where they are on fire and swiggity swooty coming for that booty, and a passive mode where they hang back only swatting at you to keep you away and firing off delayed poison explosions. That being said, these demons have different names and different colors, so you can pick which one you want to take down first, and as you may have guessed, the survivor will be the one that gets powered up to enter phase 2, but just be warned, you do have to kill both of them to actually get to phase 2, so take your time and be careful. This is going to be a bit of a long fight. The Demon Prince more than feels like a monster fitting of one of this game's final challenges and the whole series. Flying through the air, blowing everything up, and depending on which demon survives, unleashing one of 2 ultimate attacks. In orange cases, he'll shoot out a mouth laser that does good damage but is easy to avoid and exploit. However, I left Big Red alive, and he'll start charging up spirit bombs to attack you. Now your first instinct may be to run away from Big Scary Explosion, but that's actually a bad idea, and you should actually bum rush him and attack him until he gets stunned. This will create an incomplete bomb that will come crashing down on top of him. You'll still have to run and get out of the way, but that's a lot better than just getting completely annihilated by the spirit bomb. Overall, I think the Demon Prince is another one of the sleeper hit bosses, sort of like the Dragon Slayer armor, where he's a masterclass boss fight, but no one really talks about how awesome he is other than Cytonox. Shout out to Alex and Jack, by the way. Go give their videos a watch if you like boss ranking content, or an angry, barely comprehensible video on Paper Mario Sticker Star. You know, while we may be done with the Dread Keep, we sure are lacking a Ring City for a DLC that's known as the Ring City. Okay, yeah, that's a bit better. Welcome one and all to the Ring City, but be careful as the locals here are not exactly friendly. Pretty much as soon as you get in after the bonfire, a giant is going to summon a firing squad as soon as he notices you, and you'll want to drop off to the side if you don't want to get gored by all the telephone poles that are about to fly at you. And once you get past the firing squad, you're going to be greeted by a weird looking NPC that thankfully talks right away.
Many of us are by the fire, forsaken. I speak of thine kind and mine. Behold this city. We are kindred, but like two eyes which gaze upon the other. Fear not the dark, my friend, and let the feast begin. One was a wayfaring knight on an endless, forbidden search. Only the abyss granted closure, if not reunion with his beloved. Fear not the dark, and let the... Many of us are by the... I speak of thine kind. Behold, fear not the dark, my friend, and let the...
100% someone at FromSoft had this guy talk right away just so players didn't kill him on instinct. I think my least favorite enemy in this DLC are these guys right here that are basically just walking curse crystals. I'm not the biggest fan of instant death, and having something that just builds it up for you when you stand next to them is not fun, so cheesing out with arrows is definitely on the menu for this place. Once you get to the Field of Flowers, you're going to be greeted by the final major new enemy of the Dark Souls trilogy, and also, in my opinion, the best enemy in the game, the Ring Knights. These awesome badasses have varying movesets with a complexity of honestly some boss fights, but thankfully are able to be cheesed with Unga Bunga if you don't want to fight fairly. But they're not going to completely crumble unless you know what you're doing. And they also get to use their weapon arts, and I think the Ring Knight weapons are some of my personal favorites in the entire game. There's multiple variants of these foes, and they're all fun to fight, with one in particular being a standout. Another interesting enemy is these evil cleric dudes you'll be greeted by. They have one of my favorite ideas for an attack. Basically, it's just like a heal down spell, or in other words, they do a heal spell, but it's in reverse, causing you to lose health. It's a simple idea, but it's one I really like. Though, they also have the ability to spin around like a Beyblade, which is less cool. I mean, it is cool, but it's kind of annoying to deal with. Now, my advice for all new players, once you get to what looks like a giant staircase, just quit out now. Trust me.
Speak thee the name of God, thine own God, if thou canst recall. Ah, then thou'st not forgotten. Perhaps 'tis why we may converse. I am known as Shira, servant to the Princess Filianor, matriarch of the Church. They who are ken to God's name are surely ken to the terrors of the dark. Please, I bid thee take not from the princess her peace or rest. As the fire waneth, does she lie by the dark, all for the sake of man. Thou'st a kind heart to speak to a captive such as I. It is no surprise thou rememberest our God. May I ask thee a kindness? Perhaps thou'st beheld the lone dragon that inhabiteth this city. Medir is his name, and the arch-dragons are his forebears. He once railed against the dark, but was by dark afflicted. Now here, returned, he remaineth, to watch over the sleeping princess, true to the old accord. And yet, I would have thee put the dragon to rest, before the dark consumeth him, and his vows are forgot. I offer my sincerest gratitude, thou who art ken to God's name. Please, take this. I have asked a thing most terrible of thee. May this token of thanks be of aid.
This girl is the last friendly NPC we'll meet on this journey across the Dark Souls trilogy, and she gives us one final side quest that you don't have to accept, but it's worth it for the sake of story context in my opinion. She wants us to slay Midir, the final dragon of the land and a direct descendant of the ancient dragons of old that has sadly become more and more corrupted by the Abyss. Now, ultimately, I think this is an awesome way to have a final side quest, so yeah, I'm definitely going to be doing that. We're going to be showing that fight off. It's great. At this point, just run, because once you reach the Black Tar Lake, you're going to want to hang right immediately to find a bonfire. We're going to need it. Now, given Miyazaki's obsession with them, you may think of this place as some sort of poison swamp, but as far as I can tell, it's just a black lake. It's not even tar. Some people complain about it and call it lazy, but guys, it's a set piece that takes like 10 seconds to run through. Calm down. That being said, there is actually a surprise visit from a friend of old if you check the back left of the lake, as you'll come face to face with the Dragon Slayer armor for some reason. Alright, let's go, dude. I mean, I'm not complaining about fighting him again. I think he's awesome, but like, was the mere depiction of Ornstein so powerful it could survive the end of the world? I don't know. Anyways, after that sideshow is done, the real threat of this area is the Sunken Chapel, with not one, not two, but 3 ring knights patrolling the area, making for a potentially very intense challenge if you don't kite them out and take them out one at a time. So be careful here. Anyways, remember that dragon we were told about a few minutes ago? I think I found him. When you get to the catacombs area behind Midir, you might notice there's an interesting enemy here. This is the Moaning Knight, the only invader NPC in the game, as far as I remember anyways, that can invade you even if you're not embered. That being said, he happens to be in an area where gravity is very much on the table, so, you know, say hi to gravity for me, buddy. Behold, one and all, the final mimic of the Dark Souls trilogy. If I'm not mistaken, not only is that the only mimic, I'm pretty sure that's the only treasure chest in this entire DLC. Anyways, grab this bonfire. You're gonna need it because there's a tough but surprisingly fun mini-boss up ahead that we do need to take out to progress. Near the end of the Ring City, you'll be physically and audibly assaulted by Midir, determined to show he's a larger threat than Ancient Wyvern was, and he'll also make it where you can't really run past him too easily. So yeah, we actually have to fight Midir before we even get to his boss fight proper, in a surprisingly complex and well-designed mini-boss fight on the bridge. I actually do like this fight a lot. It's pretty fun, despite what you'd think from the mini-bosses, and there's a good bit of effort gone into it. His moveset all works pretty well. That being said, when he gets low on HP, he's guaranteed to get stunned, and I highly recommend finishing him off with the critical strike because it just looks so freaking cool. And right past Midir, you're going to have a sequence of invisible walls, behind enemies, behind invisible walls, to finally get yourself a treasure. Oh, and by the way, there's another invisible wall. Tongue required a head in short time for woman. Okay, messages, I think that's enough for the day. When you get to this area here with the statue, you're really going to want to take this elevator because this is going to be looping you back to an earlier bonfire, and this bonfire connects to not one, but 2 of the Ring City's boss fights, so it's pretty helpful to pick up now. And you'll know you have reached the end of the Ring City when you can drop through this little hole to pick up the Chloranthy Ring plus 3, which is a massive stamina boost. But more importantly, when you head outside and you see this beautiful scenery here, as well as the final enemy of Dark Souls. Not just Dark Souls 3, but the entire trilogy. A dual-wielding Ring Knight. This guy does not screw around, so treat him like a mini-boss and get ready for a fight. You will always get his twin great swords upon defeating him, which is pretty awesome, not gonna lie. Wake the fuck up! So, the first of our in-game bosses is going to be against an opponent known as the Spear of the Church. The fight begins with the giant, known as Judicator Argo, lecturing you, but this is actually the game disguising itself as a loading screen, as if you check the chair, he'll be none too happy with you, and he'll start trying to attack you, but he's going to very half-heartedly do it, so just walk around. Some people can get annoyed with this because, oh, it's this long-ass speech, but the thing is, it's about 40 seconds, and it really is just loading up a player, because the gimmick of this boss fight is that you're actually going to be fighting a player in a battle. You're not going to be just fighting a regular NPC. At least, not if you're playing online. And the thing is, I actually did get a player. They kicked my ass, but I got one, so that was pretty cool. Though, the craziest thing was that on my second attempt, I got another player, except no I didn't, I got Yulana again. I don't know why, just the idea of getting the same player 2 times in a row was hilarious to me, and she kicked my ass again. Hey, on the off chance you're watching this, hi, how you doing? Then, on my third attempt, I ended up getting another player. And this time around, it was extremely laggy and janky because internet, and also Dark Souls 3 online in 2025, but I was able to defeat them. However, I had a disconnect because it's Dark Souls 3 online in 2025, and as a bit of a failsafe, if you do lose connection, then Half-Light will spawn in and you'll have to battle them. I remember this boss used to spawn in at full HP, but it seems like nowadays he spawns in at like 10%, so it's not too hard to take him down. That being said, he is tougher than your average NPC because he can't be cheesed out the same way that they can most of the time. They will instead, or Half-Light instead swaps between 3 different weapon forms, and he'll try to keep you at range and use weapon arts. He's not as easy to cheese out as every other NPC who just runs at you at a flat rate. So yeah, he can be a little bit tough. I don't hate the fight. I honestly think it's fine and a neat callback to Old Monk. Plus, you actually get to fight this foe, unlike Old Monk, where half the players were going to get murdered by the Mind Flayers before they even get into the boss arena. Now, advancing any further beyond this point will mean the end of Dark Souls 3, so first let's go face the super boss. Remember, this is Dark Souls 3, so fall damage is just a suggestion, and get ready for a fight against one of the greatest dragon battles in video game history, Dark Eater Midir. Midir is a tough foe to be sure, sporting one of the largest health bars in the series, but he takes majorly increased damage on the head, so that's your main target for this fight. And thankfully, it's not hard to hit, because basically after every attack sequence Midir performs, he will be wide open and available for bonking, which you'll want to do, as this fight goes on a while because his health bar is huge. I highly recommend equipping something like the Lloyd Sword Ring for this fight, because you'll pretty much always be at either full HP or you'll be in kill range, so you want to stay at full HP at all times in this fight, and having that damage boost is helpful. And I have to admit something, I made a major oopsie. You see, when I was recording this fight originally, I accidentally deleted my attempt where I successfully killed Midir, and instead, I kept the file where Midir survived with about 2% of his health left and proceeded to kill me with his fire breath. While I did beat the boss, I have no footage showing the kill, so I guess the failure is on me here, and to make up for it, I will now proceed to beat Slave Knight Gale and Soul of Cinder on my first try. We've come a long way, but to actually finish this DLC, we're going to need to head past the Half-Light boss arena, up the elevator, up the stairs, and we're going to need to meet with Lady Filianor, so we need to meet her where she's currently resting. She provides the answers we need, and it's time we bring it into this long story. Welcome to the end of the world. Whether Filianor is showing us a vision, or simply sent our ass far into the future, I'm not entirely sure. But light this bonfire and head outside to see the devastation of the world. An amputated pygmy with a trail of dark blood is seen crawling away, warning us of a mighty red hood. So when you're ready, it's time to begin the final battle of the Dark Souls trilogy. Sort of.
This red hood is come to eat us, to eat our dark souls.
handed over that thing, your dark soul, for my lady's painting.
At the end of the world, at the end of everything, there's nothing left but death, ruination, and a crazy dude eating people fighting a blue man that calls himself Jackass. Without interacting with other people for years, aside from going om nom nom on their bodies, Gale has been reduced to something of a feral human, driven to gather the blood of the Dark Souls because yes, at the 11th hour and 58-minute mark of the series, the Dark Soul is an actual thing, or at least a concept and not just the title of the game. It's like Kingdom Hearts 1 in the Hollow Bastion area of the end of the world. Spoilers for that 23-year-old game. Savage Gale is a mighty foe, but he's not one I'd say is overly difficult. He can be demanding of you, but if you stay on point, he's not too bad. The real fight is going to start when he gets to 2/3 HP, but before that, you're going to have to bring down this savage beast, at least to get him to around, well, 2/3 HP. So, get to whacking, and remember, he will stagger after roughly every 5th major hit.
Is this the blood? The blood of the Dark Soul.
The true Dark Souls were the friends we murdered and devoured along the way, or something. If for but a moment, he has regained his composure and is here to give you your final battle. Gale is a spectacular battle, and when he regains his composure, determined to give you the final duel you so seek, with his broken greatsword, a flowing cape so tainted by humanity and the pygmies he's devoured that it hurts to touch, meaning that dodging at the right time in the correct direction is a must if you want to come out of this fight unscathed, and his repeating crossbow. Yeah, this fight's awesome. He's got some tricks up his sleeve, so he's not just a sword wielder. That crossbow is one thing, then he has the Way of the White Corona attack that can fire off 5 discus of light. I wish we got that, but we sadly don't get anything like that till Elden Ring. And you know, again, the crossbow, which is basically the Dark Souls 3 AK-47 mod. Or, you know, I guess Shadow Tower Abyss. It's a tough fight. The music is intense, and I think the storm rolling in really does set the tone that this is coming to an end. And yes, you could say this boss fight really does have some
good atmosphere.
But of course, the fight truly comes into its own as he reaches 1/3 health. He has one last phase up his sleeve as he begins to lose control of the Dark Souls, causing it to start bursting out of his body violently, scattering across the destroyed world with a power so great that lightning itself will be called down on the locations it landed just seconds later. This acts as a bit of a positioning check, but really it just exists to make the fight look cooler. You're not really going to get hit by the lightning unless you're careless. And at this point, the proud warrior still remains, but is beginning to slip as Gale begins to wildly fling himself around the arena and burst out more and more of the Dark Soul, almost as if he's become a puppet to the power itself, and the final battle is against the Dark Soul itself. And this entire fight happens while Yuka Kitamura has one of her best tracks play, and it was actually the trailer theme for Ring City, giving this fight a bit of a sense of bookending, and while maybe not intentional, was really cool. But while Gale may be a mighty foe, he is still just another of the many foes Jackass has toppled. Gale can choose to die as a man, or as a savage beast. But either way, he's still going to die. At this point, with Gale dead, there's very little left of the game now. All the DLCs are complete, all the worthwhile questlines are finished, all the bosses are slain. All that's left is to say farewell to the companions we've made along the way, and if you want, this is your last chance to speak with Ludleth, so maybe consider doing it now.
Ah, well met. All is as 5 lords for 5 thrones. To think others might ne'er be raised. And I, of the last lords, a rather little lord, most undeserving of the honor. Speak with the Firekeeper. The eyes show a world destitute of fire, a barren plain of endless darkness, a place born of betrayal. So I willed myself lord to link the fire, to paint a new vision. What is thine intent? The eyes show us what? I took the mantle of Lord of Cinder of mine own volition. I speak these words with pride. Choose thy fate alone. Seize it with thine own hands. All the more should thy fate entail such foul betrayal.
Noble lords of Cinder, the fire fades. And the lords go without thrones. Surrender your fires to the true heir. Let him grant death to the old gods of Lordran, deliverers of the first flame.
After traveling to the kiln of the First Flame, you might recognize this place as not only the location from Dark Souls 1, but also the upper regions of the Dreg Heap. And that's kind of worth noting because this is one of the 2 ways you can actually reach the Ring City, with the other being slaying Sister Fried and beating Ashes of Ariandel. Let's beat the game, shall we? At the end of it all, we face off against our final trial, and what foe is better to end off the culmination of everything than a fight against the culmination of everything itself? The Soul of Cinder is, in my opinion, the perfect final boss, in both thematics and gameplay, as you're effectively fighting the player character from Dark Souls 1, so I guess this battle is actually against Mo Ran. Anyways, being serious, the Soul of Cinder has 4 builds you will swap between, starting out against a straight sword user that is overall balanced but has a bias towards weapon arts and can be pretty aggressive. He likes to fake you out, so you need to be careful in this fight, but he won't be sticking in this phase for too long, as he'll quickly change to another build, and on your first run it'll always be the Sorcerer, and pretty easy to be honest, but his love for the Soul Greatsword and the Kamehameha as well as the Crystal Soul Mass Aura can be a bit dangerous. Though it should be noted Vow of Silence does work on him, so you can completely neuter this form if you want to. The other thing to note is that his auras will carry over between form shifts, so be careful. The third form you're going to see is the mighty lance-wielding paladin that focuses on miracles like Dark Souls 1, Wrath of the Gods, Soothing Sunlight, Bountiful Sunlight, as well as just railing your ass with his lance, and giving himself the ability to regenerate his HP. Overall, I think this is actually the hardest of the phases to deal with, though that's probably just because it's the one I'm the least good at dealing with, because thrust attacks are a little harder for me to react against than, say, slash attacks. But maybe that's just a me thing, and you might find this phase actually pretty easily. I guess it's up to you. Then he'll go into his final form, a falchion-wielding pyromancer that loves backflips because he's got the Darkwood Grain Ring. He's also got the Power Within buff on himself, and, Toxic Mist. Overall, this can be a tricky opponent. His first battle is always set to go in this order of Straight Sword, Sorcerer, Lance, Falchion, but upon repeat fights, the cycle ends, or after the cycle ends, he can choose the forms he desires at will, aside from always beginning with Straight Sword, which becomes a lot scarier when he can now bring his aura buffs over. If this was the final boss on its own, it'd be a fun and dynamic finale, and you know what? I think as it is, the Soul of Cinder is my favorite boss in this game, and probably the best final boss in the entire, well, not final boss, but the best boss in the entire Dark Souls trilogy. On its own, this is a super fun fight, but what really got it there wasn't just this. You see, Dark Souls 3 was a game that keeps bringing out surprises. From Udex Gundyr going into a monster mode, to bosses having second health bars. And in this case, they had one last trick up their sleeve, and it speaks for itself better than I ever could. We saw with Gale what happens if we keep linking the fire, so let's try something different.
the first flame quickly fades. Darkness will shortly settle. But one day, tiny flames will dance across the darkness. Like embers linked by Lord's Pass. Ashen One, hearest thou my voice still?
And that, everyone, is Dark Souls 3. Little fun facts, you can attack the Firekeeper during that ending sequence if you're an asshole, and that'll get you a separate ending, but I'm not evil. Otherwise, another fun fact, if you slew Slave Knight Gale before finishing the game, the credits music actually does change ever so slightly. But that's about all I've got to say for this. I think Dark Souls 3 is a special game. I love it. It is my favorite game in the trilogy, and I think it acts as a perfect send-off to, well, the Dark Souls trilogy as a whole. I know we would get more games with Sekiro and Elden Ring, but they were doing their own thing. This was the end of the Dark Souls games, of kind of, I guess, Soulsborne in its own sort of way. And I think it was the best one. I like it more than Dark Souls 1, 2, I like it more than Bloodborne. And I sure as heck like it more than Demon Souls. We'll talk about Demon Souls another day, maybe. I don't know. There's only so many times I can spam the good atmosphere meme. Who am I kidding? No, there's not. But, yeah. I love this game. I think the combat's good. I think the story and kind of the idea of how are people coping with the end of the world is good. I love the music. Yuka Kitamura does a great job. Motoi Sakuraba does a fantastic job with the songs he has. It's awesome. I think this was kind of a good send-off, and while some people definitely say the game relies too much on fan service, and I won't say that it doesn't get a bit excessive at points, it never really bothered me. Like, even with Anor Londo, the approach to it was so different compared to the Anor Londo in Dark Souls 1. Like, the only thing that's the same is that part at the very end. Really, Irithyll itself, the whole lead up to that, that's like the Anor Londo streets. So, to me, that wasn't some, oh, look, they were lazy. No, that was, oh, yeah, this is really cool. Wasn't quite as giddy as I was when I played Metaphor ReFantazio and got to the Dragon Grace area, but that's a spoiler for a different game entirely, so I won't go talking about that right now. Overall, though, with that, I finished the entire trilogy. I don't have too much else to say. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I don't know. Let's see, what else is there really for me to talk about at this point? I didn't really script this outro bit outside of, like, the last paragraph. So some big thanks, I guess. Yeah, big thanks. I want to give thanks to... let's see. I want to give a thanks to TitaRussell. She helped screen over some of the videos and let me know when I had an issue with one of the audio segments. Otherwise, there would have been a really awkward point during the Ariandel bit. And she also got me some footage of alternate cutscenes. That was very nice of her. Thanks to thanks to Alex from Cytonox for the good atmosphere meme. I have been running that joke into the ground for way too long. And also just, you know, some of my other friends for the words of encouragement, sticking with this, because I wanted to make this one of my biggest videos, and I think it's something ultimately I'm proud of. It's not perfect, but hey, you know what? I think I did a good job here. Thanks to Russian Knight for making the thumbnail. I should be popping it up here, assuming that I didn't screw up in the editing process, and if I did, well, then I'll leave some text calling me an idiot or something. And overall, I think that's about it. Yeah, the Dark Souls trilogy's done, the boss ranking's finished. There's not much left for me to really talk about with this series of games. Well, outside of, I guess, probably needing to re-rank Dark Souls 1, since that was on my old channel, which got deleted and is also really bad. We don't talk about it. I think I'm just kind of out of random stuff to talk about at this point, so I guess I'll do the outro bit now. That's all I have for you for now. I hope you enjoyed this video, as it was pretty fun to make and satisfying to finally finish off the Dark Souls trilogy. I'm not sure when or if I'll cover other From Software games, but as someone who loves these games, I wanted to share my love for them, and hey, if you enjoyed these videos and some of my bizarre takes like Gaping Dragon being awesome, or maybe you agree with the hot take of Sister Freed isn't very good, I don't know. Whether or not you agree with those takes, I'm glad you enjoyed the video, and I consider this project a success. That's all I have for now. If you enjoyed, consider liking and subscribing, because my monkey brain likes it when number goes up. I'll see you all next time, for whatever that may be. Although, as a spoiler, I actually already know what game I'm going to cover next, at least for a full-length video. So, barring any major shakeups, well, it'll be something much simpler than Dark Souls, we can say that for sure. And with that, take care, everyone.
My thanks, Ashen One. With this will I paint a world. Please tell me thy name. I would name this painting after thee. My thanks. I will paint a world of that name. It will be a cold, dark, and very gentle place. And one day, it will make someone a goodly home. I wonder when Uncle Gale intends his return. I hope the new painting will be to him a gentle home.
Well, Jackass is copywritten, so I'm just going to assume that she's created Elden Ring Night Rain or something.